My name is Adrian Hayes, and today I'm going to tell you about the moment God spoke words that shattered my constant anxiety, words that revealed the peace I'd been desperately searching for was found in Him alone. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If anxiety controls your life, if your mind races constantly, please subscribe to this channel and share this with someone who's drowning in anxious thoughts. And in the comments below, tell me what anxiety keeps you trapped. Your struggle matters, and you're not alone. I was 31 years old when anxiety became my constant companion, not the normal kind of stress or occasional worry, the kind that never stopped, that made every moment feel like a crisis, that convinced me something terrible was always about to happen. I worked as an ER physician in Chicago, ironically helping others through medical crises while my own mind was in constant crisis mode. I was good at my job, calm under pressure, decisive in emergencies, skilled at handling trauma. But that was at work. At home, away from the adrenaline and structure, my mind became a prison of anxiety. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, convinced something was wrong even though nothing was. I'd check my phone obsessively. Missed calls, emergency texts, bad news. My mind created catastrophes that didn't exist. During the day, the anxiety manifested as constant vigilance. What if I made a medical error? What if a patient died because of my mistake? What if I missed something crucial? What if my career ended in a lawsuit? Even mundane activities triggered anxiety. Driving home. What if I get in an accident? Eating at a restaurant. What if I'm having a heart attack? Feeling tired? What if it's a serious illness? My girlfriend Rachel had been patient for 2 years, but her patience was wearing thin. "Adrian, you need help," she said one evening after I'd spiraled into anxiety over a headache I was convinced was a brain tumor. "I'm fine, just stressed." "You're not fine. You're anxious all the time. You can't relax. You can't enjoy anything because you're always waiting for disaster." "That's my job. I see disasters every day. I know what can go wrong. But you're living like disaster is always imminent, like you can never just be at peace." She was right. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt genuinely peaceful. My baseline was low-grade anxiety. My norm was expecting catastrophe. At work, I started making mistakes. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that my supervisor noticed. "Adrian, you seem distracted lately. Is everything okay?" "Just tired." "You're an excellent physician, but I'm worried about you. You seem on edge constantly." That night, I had a panic attack. Full-blown. Heart racing. Can't breathe. Convinced I'm dying. Rachel drove me to the ER where I worked, and my colleagues ran tests. Everything came back normal. "It's anxiety," the attending physician told me. "Classic panic attack. Have you considered seeing someone?" "I'm fine, just a stressful day." But I wasn't fine. I was drowning in anxiety and had no idea how to find peace. Rachel broke up with me the following week. "I love you, but I can't watch you destroy yourself with anxiety. I can't be your only source of calm. You need help I can't give you. Don't leave, I'll get better. I'll manage the anxiety." That's exactly the problem. You keep trying to manage it yourself. You won't get therapy. You won't consider medication. You won't even acknowledge it's a real problem. "I can't fix you, Adrian, and I can't keep drowning with you." After she left, I sat in my empty apartment feeling the full weight of my anxiety without her stabilizing presence. And I realized I'd been using her as my anxiety management tool. When I felt anxious, I'd call her, lean on her, need her reassurance. Now she was gone, and I was left alone with my anxious mind. That weekend, I had 3 panic attacks. I stopped eating. I couldn't sleep. I showed up to work exhausted and was sent home. "Take a week off," my supervisor insisted. "Get help. This isn't sustainable." I drove aimlessly that evening, not wanting to go home to an empty apartment where my anxiety would consume me. I ended up at a church I'd passed 1,000 times, but never entered. I'd grown up Catholic, gone to church as a kid, but had drifted away in medical school. God had become an abstract concept, not a present reality. The church was dark, but the door was unlocked. I walked in and sat in a back pew surrounded by silence. And then I broke. All the anxiety I'd been holding, all the panic I'd been managing, all the fear I'd been carrying, it came pouring out. God, if you're real, I need help. My mind won't stop. I'm anxious about everything. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't function. I've lost Rachel. I'm losing my career. I'm losing myself. I don't know how to find peace. I don't know how to quiet my mind. I don't know how to not be afraid all the time. I sat there crying in the darkness, feeling completely broken. My medical training had taught me to fix problems, but I couldn't fix my own mind. And then, in the quietest, most unexpected way, I heard something that stopped my racing thoughts completely, not audibly, but with absolute clarity in my spirit. Words so simple, so profound, so peace-giving that they cut through every anxious thought. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. I froze. The words settled over me like a warm blanket in winter. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. I'd been trying to find peace through control, controlling circumstances, controlling outcomes, controlling my environment, through distraction, work, relationships, busyness, through avoidance, ignoring the anxiety, pushing through it, pretending it wasn't consuming me. But God was saying peace wasn't found in any of those things. It was found in Him. But God, I whispered, my mind won't stop. The anxiety is constant. How do I find peace when my thoughts won't be quiet? And I heard it again, even clearer. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me, not in fixing your thoughts, not in controlling your circumstances, not in making the anxiety disappear. In me, my presence is your peace. I sat with those words for a long time. My whole life I'd been trying to eliminate anxiety, through control, through distraction, through sheer willpower. But God was offering something different, peace that existed alongside anxiety, not by removing it. Peace found in His presence, not in perfect circumstances or quiet thoughts. When I finally stood to leave, it was nearly midnight. I felt different. Not like my anxiety was gone, it wasn't, but like I'd been given something to hold on to when anxiety came. Driving home, I thought about what God had said. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. That meant anxiety might still be there, but peace could be there too. Not because circumstances were perfect, not because my thoughts were under control, but because God's presence offered peace that transcended my anxious mind. I pulled out my phone and looked up Bible verses about peace. One jumped out at me from Philippians 4:6-7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Peace that transcends understanding, not peace that comes from understanding everything, controlling everything, predicting everything. Peace that exists despite not understanding. I started journaling, something I'd never done. God told me tonight that the anxiety of my mind finds peace in Him. I don't fully understand what that means yet. My mind is still racing. I'm still anxious. But something shifted. I'm not alone in this anxiety anymore. God is offering His presence as peace. I need to learn what that means. The next morning, I woke up with the same anxious thoughts. What if I can't go back to work? What if Rachel never comes back? What if I'm broken permanently? But underneath the anxiety, I remembered, the anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. I tried something new. Instead of trying to shut down the anxious thoughts, instead of distracting myself, instead of spiraling, I prayed, God, I'm anxious. My mind is racing. But you said the anxiety of my mind finds peace in you. I don't know how that works, but I'm choosing to believe it. Help me find peace in your presence even while my mind is loud. I didn't feel immediate relief. The anxious thoughts didn't disappear, but I felt less alone in them. Like someone was with me in the anxiety, offering peace I couldn't manufacture myself. I called a therapist that day, something I'd been refusing to do for months. Dr. Martinez specialized in anxiety disorders and had an opening. "Tell me what's going on," she said at our first session. I shared everything. The constant anxiety, the panic attacks, Rachel leaving, the breakdown at work, and then I shared about the church, about what God had said. "That's interesting theology," she said. "Many people think faith means anxiety disappears, but what you're describing is faith that offers peace alongside anxiety. That's actually healthier." "What do you mean?" "Anxiety is part of your brain's threat detection system. Sometimes it's overactive, like yours is. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety, it's to manage it, to not let it control you. And having a spiritual anchor, a source of peace that exists regardless of your mental state, that's powerful." And she diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and recommended a combination of therapy, possibly medication, and continuing to develop spiritual practices. "You're a physician. You know mental health is health. Treating anxiety isn't a weakness, it's wisdom." I started medication that week, not as a replacement for faith, but as a tool alongside it. God had given me his peace, and he'd also given humanity the knowledge to develop medications that help anxious brains. At church that Sunday, I met with a priest. Father Michael listened to my story. God's peace doesn't mean the absence of anxiety. It means his presence in the midst of anxiety. You're learning what saints have known for millennia, that we can have peace even when circumstances are chaotic or our minds are troubled. How do I access that peace? Prayer, scripture, community, sacraments. These are ways we encounter God's presence. And in his presence, we find peace our circumstances can't give and our anxiety can't take away. I started attending daily Mass, not because I thought it would cure my anxiety, but because it was a daily reminder of God's presence, the source of peace my anxious mind needed. Rachel texted me that week, "I heard you're getting help. I'm proud of you." I didn't ask to get back together, didn't try to convince her I was fixed. Just replied, "Thank you, you were right. I needed help I couldn't give myself. How are you doing?" Learning to find peace in God's presence instead of trying to eliminate anxiety through control. "It's harder than I thought, but better than what I was doing." "That sounds healthy. I'm rooting for you." Her response brought both sadness and peace. Sadness that we weren't together, but peace that I was finally on the right path. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The anxiety of my mind finds peace in God." Not peace that removes anxiety, but peace that exists with it. Peace that comes from his presence, not from perfect circumstances or controlled thoughts. I'm learning that this peace is real, that I can be anxious and at peace simultaneously, that God's presence is more powerful than my anxiety. It's a daily practice. Some days I remember, some days I forget. But the truth remains, my anxious mind can find peace in him, and that changes everything. As I closed the journal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that my anxiety would disappear, but hope that I could live fully despite it. Hope that the peace God offered was real, available, and transformative. And that truth, that simple, profound truth, was just beginning to change my life. The week after hearing God's voice, I returned to work with a mixture of hope and terror. Hope that I was finally getting help. Terror that my anxiety would make me incompetent as a physician. My first shift back, I was assigned to trauma. A car accident came in, multiple victims, critical injuries, the kind of case that required absolute focus and calm. As the ambulance arrived, I felt the familiar spike of anxiety. What if I make a mistake? What if someone dies because I'm too anxious to think clearly? What if my anxiety costs someone their life? But then I remembered, the anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. I took a breath and prayed silently, God, I'm anxious. But you said my anxious mind finds peace in your presence. Be with me right now. I didn't feel instant calm. The anxiety was still there, my heart still racing. But underneath it, I felt steadied. Like I wasn't facing this alone. The trauma lasted 4 hours, multiple surgeries, split-second decisions, life or death moments. And through it all, I felt both anxiety and peace coexisting. Anxiety about the outcomes, about my decisions, about whether I was doing enough, but peace from knowing God was present, that my worth wasn't dependent on perfect performance, that I could do my best and trust God with results I couldn't control. All the patients survived. My supervisor pulled me aside afterward. "That was excellent work, Adrian. You seemed different, more centered somehow." I'm getting help. Therapy, medication, and learning to find peace in God's presence instead of trying to control everything. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. That was the physician I know you can be. At therapy, Dr. Martinez helped me understand my anxiety patterns. Your anxiety is rooted in hypervigilance. As an ER doctor, that serves you at work. You're trained to see danger, anticipate problems, prepare for worst-case scenarios. But you've generalized that to your entire life. So my job is making me anxious. Your job trained your brain to be constantly alert to danger, but your brain doesn't know how to turn that off when you're not at work. So you're scanning for threats constantly. In your health, your relationships, your daily life. How do I stop? You don't stop anxiety completely. You learn to recognize it, manage it, and not let it control you. And you've already discovered something powerful. Spiritual grounding that offers peace regardless of your mental state. She taught me techniques, breathing exercises, cognitive reframing, mindfulness practices, but she also encouraged me to keep developing my spiritual practices. For many people with anxiety, having something transcendent to anchor to, God, in your case, provides a sense of safety that mental techniques alone can't give. Don't separate your therapy from your faith. Let them work together. I started attending a support group at church for people dealing with anxiety and depression. 8 people gathered weekly in a small room, sharing struggles and supporting each other. The first meeting, I felt out of place. I was a doctor. I should have it together. But then I remembered what Dr. Martinez said. Treating anxiety is wisdom, not weakness. "I'm Adrian," I introduced myself. "I'm an ER physician, and I have severe anxiety that almost destroyed my career and relationship." A woman named Elena spoke next. "I'm Elena. I've had panic disorder for 10 years. I've been hospitalized 3 times, but I'm learning that God's peace can exist even in my most anxious moments." A man named Tom shared, "I'm Tom. I have health anxiety. I'm convinced every symptom is a serious illness. I've been to the ER probably 50 times in the past year. I'm learning that my anxious mind can find peace in God, even when my body is sending panic signals." Hearing their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. These were people who understood that anxiety wasn't just worrying too much. It was a real condition that required real help. Over the following weeks, the group became essential. We'd share what triggered our anxiety that week, how we'd coped, what helped us find peace. Elena told me one evening, "The phrase you shared, 'the anxiety of your mind finds peace in me,' has become my daily prayer. When I wake up anxious, I say it. When I have a panic attack, I remember it. It doesn't make anxiety disappear, but it reminds me I'm not alone in it. That's exactly how it works for me too. Peace alongside anxiety, not instead of it." At church, Father Michael recommended I read the Psalms. The psalmists were anxious people who learned to bring their anxiety to God. They didn't pretend to be at peace. They were honest about their fear, their worry, their panic, but they also declared God's faithfulness in the midst of it. I started reading a psalm every morning. Psalm 94:19 particularly resonated. "When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy." The psalmist didn't say anxiety disappeared. He said God's consolation brought joy in the midst of anxiety. Joy and anxiety coexisting, just like peace and anxiety were coexisting in my life. I wrote in my journal, "I'm learning that peace in God's presence doesn't mean I stop feeling anxious. It means God's peace is deeper than my anxiety. My anxious thoughts are the surface waves. God's peace is the deep, still water underneath. Both exist simultaneously." The medication started working after a few weeks. I didn't feel drugged or emotionless. I felt like the volume on my anxiety had been turned down from deafening to manageable. The medication is helping, I told Dr. Martinez. The anxious thoughts are still there, but they're not as overwhelming. That's how it should work. Medication doesn't eliminate anxiety. It makes it manageable so you can use the coping skills you're learning. I was afraid medication meant I wasn't trusting God enough. That's a common fear. But medication is a gift from God. Humans discovering how to help brains that struggle. Taking medication isn't lack of faith any more than taking antibiotics for an infection is lack of faith. It's wisdom. At work, I started noticing when anxiety was helpful versus when it was harmful. In trauma situations, mild anxiety kept me alert and focused. But when I was obsessing over a decision I'd already made, when I was catastrophizing about outcomes I couldn't control, that was harmful anxiety. I learned to ask myself, is this anxiety serving me right now, or is it controlling me? If it was serving me, preparing me for a difficult procedure, making me double-check critical decisions, I acknowledged it as useful. If it was controlling me, making me check my phone obsessively, convincing me I'd made a fatal error when I hadn't, keeping me awake with imagined catastrophes, I'd pray, God, this anxiety isn't serving me. Help me find peace in your presence. One particularly anxious evening I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing through everything that could go wrong. At work, with my health, with my future. I tried all my techniques, but nothing helped. Finally, I got up and went to the church. It was 2 a.m., but the Adoration Chapel was open 24/7. I sat in front of the Blessed Sacrament in the quiet darkness. God, I'm exhausted. My mind won't stop. I've tried everything I know. I need your peace. I sat there for an hour, not trying to pray eloquently, just being present with God. And slowly the anxiety began to quiet, not disappear, but quiet. I felt the truth of what God had said. The anxiety of my mind finds peace in Him, not in techniques, not in medication, though those helped, not in my own efforts, in His presence. Driving home at 3 a.m., I felt more peaceful than I had in months, and I realized this was what it meant to find peace in God. Coming to Him when I was desperate, when nothing else worked, and experiencing His presence as peace. Rachel reached out a few weeks later. Can we have coffee? I'd like to hear how you're doing. We met at our old favorite cafe. It was bittersweet. I still loved her, still missed her, but I also knew she'd been right to leave. You look better, she said, less haunted. I'm getting help. Real help. Therapy, medication, and learning to find peace in God instead of trying to control everything to avoid anxiety. I'm really glad. I hated leaving, but I couldn't watch you destroy yourself. I understand. You were right. I was using you as my anxiety management system. That wasn't fair to you. What's different now? I'm learning that anxiety is part of my brain chemistry, not a character flaw, that it requires treatment, not just willpower. And that peace doesn't mean the absence of anxiety. It means God's presence in the midst of it. That's profound. I wish I'd understood that when we were together. I didn't understand it either. I had to hit bottom to learn it. We talked for 2 hours, catching up, sharing honestly. It became clear we weren't getting back together. Too much had changed. We were both in different places. But as I hugged her goodbye, I felt peace. Not the peace of getting what I wanted, but the peace of accepting what was. Peace that existed despite loss, despite things not working out as I'd hoped. At the support group that week, I shared about seeing Rachel. I was anxious before meeting her, anxious during, anxious after, but I also had peace, God's peace that existed alongside my anxiety. I didn't get her back, but I was okay. That's growth I couldn't have imagined a month ago. Tom said, that's what we're all learning. Peace and anxiety can coexist. We don't have to wait for anxiety to disappear to experience peace. God's presence offers peace right now, in the middle of our anxious moments. Elena added, I had a panic attack yesterday at the grocery store, but afterward, instead of spiraling into shame about having a panic attack, I prayed, and I felt God's peace, not removing the panic, but holding me through it. These testimonies reminded me that I wasn't alone in learning this. We were all discovering the same truth. Our anxious minds could find peace in God. At my next shift, I treated a young woman having a severe panic attack. She was convinced she was dying, that something was catastrophically wrong. After ruling out medical emergencies, I sat with her. I understand what you're experiencing. I have panic disorder too. What you're feeling is real, but you're not dying. This is anxiety. How do you function with this? How do you work in an ER if you have panic attacks? Treatment, therapy, medication, spiritual practices, and learning that anxiety doesn't disqualify me from living fully. I can be anxious and still do my job. You can be anxious and still live your life. I feel like I'm losing my mind. You're not. Your brain's threat detection system is overactive, but you can learn to manage it, and you can find peace even when anxiety is loud. I gave her referrals for therapy and told her about the support group. A week later, she showed up. "You helped me," she said after the meeting, "not just medically, but by showing me that having anxiety doesn't mean I'm broken, that I can find peace despite it." Helping her reminded me why I'd learned about God's peace, not just for myself, but to help others discover it too. 3 months after God spoke to me, I reflected on the changes. My anxiety was still present, probably always would be, but it no longer controlled me. I'd learned to recognize anxiety triggers, to use coping techniques, to take medication without shame, to find peace in God's presence rather than trying to eliminate anxiety through control. My relationship with Rachel was over, but I was okay. My career was thriving in new ways. My spiritual life was deeper than ever. I wrote in my journal, 3 months since God told me the anxiety of my mind finds peace in Him. I'm still learning what that means. Still discovering that peace isn't the absence of anxiety. It's God's presence in the midst of it. Some days I remember this easily. Some days I forget and try to manage anxiety through control. But I'm growing, healing, learning that my anxious mind really can find peace in God. Not because anxiety disappears, but because God's peace is deeper than any anxiety. At church, Father Michael asked if I'd be willing to share my testimony during a service. I was terrified, but felt called to say yes. Standing in front of the congregation, I was more nervous than I'd been in years, but I also felt God's peace. 3 months ago, I had a breakdown, severe anxiety disorder, panic attacks, lost my relationship, nearly lost my career. I'm an ER physician. I'm supposed to handle stress, but I was drowning in anxiety. I shared about that night in the church, about God's words, about learning that anxiety and peace could coexist. God didn't promise to remove my anxiety. He promised that my anxious mind could find peace in Him. That's been transformative, because I'm not waiting for anxiety to disappear to experience peace. I'm experiencing God's peace right now, even while managing anxiety. If you struggle with anxiety, you don't have to wait for it to be gone to find peace. God offers His peace in the midst of your anxiety, not after it's resolved. After the service, over a dozen people approached me. Most shared their own anxiety struggles. Several asked about the support group. One man, probably in his 60s, said with tears, "I've had anxiety my whole life. I thought it meant I didn't have enough faith. Hearing you say God's peace can exist alongside anxiety, that's the first time I've felt hope in decades." His words hit me hard. How many people were suffering, thinking their anxiety meant spiritual failure? How many needed to hear that peace wasn't the absence of anxiety, but God's presence in it? That night, I prayed, "God, thank you for teaching me about your peace. Thank you for showing me it's not about eliminating anxiety, but about experiencing your presence in it. Use my story to help others discover the same peace." And I felt, clearly, that this was just the beginning, that God was going to use my anxiety journey, the breakdown, the healing, the discovery of peace, to help many others find the same peace I'd found. The anxiety of my mind had found peace in Him, And that peace was transforming everything. 6 months after God spoke to me, I faced a test that challenged everything I'd learned. The hospital offered me a promotion to head of the emergency department, a position I'd dreamed of for years. But accepting it meant more responsibility, higher stakes, increased pressure, everything that had previously triggered my anxiety disorder. "Congratulations," my supervisor said when he offered the position. "You've earned this. You're the best physician we have, and your leadership during trauma situations is exceptional." "Thank you. Can I have some time to consider it?" He looked surprised. Most people would accept immediately. "Is something holding you back?" "I want to make sure I'm ready. 6 months ago, I was barely functional because of anxiety. I need to be certain I can handle this without spiraling again." "That's actually why we're offering it to you. You've shown remarkable growth. You've been honest about your struggles and sought help. That's the kind of leadership we need." I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Martinez. I should be excited about this promotion, but I'm terrified. What if the increased pressure triggers my anxiety again? What if I can't handle it? Let's examine those fears. What specifically are you afraid of? That I'll make catastrophic decisions. That people will die because I'm too anxious to think clearly. That I'll have a panic attack during a critical moment. That everyone will realize I'm not actually capable of this role. She wrote as I talked, then looked up. "Adrian, all of those fears are your anxiety talking. What does your rational mind say?" I thought about it. That I'm qualified, that I've proven I can handle pressure, that my anxiety is managed now with medication and therapy, that God's peace is available even in high-stress situations. That's reality. Your anxiety is creating catastrophic what-ifs. But you've spent 6 months learning that anxiety and competence can coexist, that God's peace is available regardless of circumstances. This is an opportunity to trust what you've learned. I spent that evening in the Adoration Chapel, praying about the decision. "God, I want this position, but I'm terrified. What if my anxiety makes me a bad leader? What if I fail?" As I sat in the quiet, I felt God's presence, and I remembered His words. "The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. Not your anxiety will disappear if you trust me. Not perfect faith means no fear, but your anxious mind finds peace in my presence." I could accept this promotion anxious. I could lead anxious. Because anxiety didn't disqualify me. It was just part of who I was. And God's peace was available to me as an anxious leader, not just as an anxiety-free one. I accepted the position the next day. My first month as department head was overwhelming. Managing staff, making policy decisions, handling crises, all while still treating patients. The anxiety spiked regularly, but I'd learned to recognize it and respond differently. When I felt anxiety rising about a decision, I'd pause. "God, I'm anxious about this, but your peace is available to me. Help me lead from peace, not from fear." I implemented a morning routine that grounded me before work. Prayer, reading a psalm, taking my medication, and reminding myself, God's peace is deeper than my anxiety. The staff noticed the difference. My assistant director, Dr. Reyes, commented, "You're remarkably calm for someone in your first month as department head. Most new leaders are frantic. I'm not calm. I'm anxious, but I've learned to find peace in God's presence despite the anxiety. That allows me to lead from peace instead of letting anxiety drive my decisions." That's a distinction I've never considered. You can be anxious and peaceful simultaneously. Yes, peace isn't the absence of anxiety. It's God's presence in the midst of it. The support group continued meeting weekly. We'd grown to 15 regular members, all learning to find peace despite anxiety. Elena shared a breakthrough. "I went on a trip, something I haven't done in years because of panic disorder. I had 2 panic attacks during the flight, but I also had peace. I didn't let the panic attacks ruin the trip or convince me I'd made a mistake. I felt God's presence through the anxiety." Tom said, "I've been anxiety-free for 3 weeks." Everyone applauded, but he held up his hand. But I'm learning that being anxiety-free isn't the goal. The goal is trusting God's peace, whether anxiety is present or not. These 3 weeks are a gift, but my worth and peace aren't dependent on anxiety being gone. His maturity impressed me. 6 months ago, he'd been desperate for anxiety to disappear. Now he understood that peace wasn't contingent on anxiety's absence. I shared my own update. I accepted a promotion that terrifies me, but I'm learning to lead anxious, to make decisions despite anxiety, to find God's peace in high-pressure situations. Some days are harder than others, but I'm not waiting for anxiety to disappear to move forward with my life. A new member, Sarah, asked, "How do you know the difference between wisdom telling you not to do something and anxiety telling you not to do something?" That's a great question. I've learned to ask, is this fear based on actual risk, or is it catastrophic thinking? Is my hesitation wisdom, or is it anxiety trying to keep me in my comfort zone? And I pray for discernment, asking God to help me distinguish between His guidance and my anxiety. But what if you're wrong? What if it's wisdom and you do it anyway? Then I'll face consequences and learn from them. But I've discovered that anxiety will always have reasons not to do things. If I let it control my decisions, I'll never do anything that involves risk or uncertainty. That's not living, it's surviving. At work, I faced my first major crisis as department head. A patient died during what should have been a routine procedure. Not due to negligence, just one of those tragic outcomes that sometimes happen in medicine. But the family was threatening to sue, the staff was shaken, the hospital administration was scrutinizing every decision. The old Adrian would have spiraled, would have obsessed over every detail, convinced himself he'd missed something, lost sleep catastrophizing about the lawsuit. The new Adrian felt all those anxieties, but didn't let them control him. I acknowledged the fear. I'm anxious about this. It's a difficult situation with real consequences. Then I found peace. God, this is beyond my control. I did everything right, but the outcome was tragic. Help me handle this with integrity and trust you with results I can't control. I met with the family, expressing genuine sorrow for their loss, while explaining the medical realities. I led a debrief with staff, acknowledging the difficulty while reinforcing that unexpected outcomes happen even with excellent care. Dr. Reyes pulled me aside afterward. "That was masterful. You were compassionate without being defensive, honest without being cold. How did you stay so composed?" I wasn't composed internally, I was anxious. But I've learned to act from peace, despite anxiety. God's presence gives me a foundation that circumstances can't shake. I need to learn that. I'm always anxious about malpractice, about making mistakes. It's exhausting. It is. But anxiety doesn't have to control us. Peace is available even in our most anxious moments. That evening I had coffee with Father Michael. "How are you handling the stress of leadership?" "With more anxiety than I'd like, but also with more peace than I expected." I'm learning that God's peace isn't conditional on circumstances being manageable. It's available even when circumstances are overwhelming. That's mature faith. Most people think faith means life becomes easy. But real faith is trusting God when life is hard. I'm also learning that anxiety isn't a spiritual failure. It's part of my mental health that requires ongoing management, just like diabetes requires insulin management. I can be anxious and faithful simultaneously. Exactly. The psalmists were anxious. So was Jesus in Gethsemane. Anxiety is part of being human, not evidence of failed faith. I started writing about my journey, creating a blog about living with anxiety as a physician and person of faith. I shared honestly about panic attacks, medication, therapy, and finding peace in God. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people who felt less alone, less ashamed, more hopeful that peace was possible despite anxiety. One comment particularly moved me. "I'm a pastor who's hidden my anxiety disorder for 15 years, terrified my congregation would lose faith in me if they knew." Reading about your journey, a physician and leader who's open about anxiety, is giving me courage to be honest about my struggles. I replied, "Your anxiety doesn't disqualify you from ministry. It makes you more compassionate, more understanding of human struggle. Don't hide it, share it. You'll help more people by being honest than you ever could, by pretending to have it all together." At the support group, I shared about the blog and the responses. "People are desperate to hear that anxiety and faith can coexist," Elena said. "That peace isn't about anxiety disappearing. Thank you for being vulnerable. It's scary being this public about mental health. As a physician, there's pressure to appear infallible." Tom added, "But that's exactly why it matters. If you, a department head, a physician, can admit to anxiety and still be successful, it gives the rest of us permission to be honest too." 6 months into the role, I faced my biggest challenge yet: a mass casualty event, a building collapse with dozens of injured, the kind of situation that required absolute clarity and leadership. As the first ambulance arrived, I felt the familiar anxiety spike, but I also felt God's peace. "God, I'm anxious, but you're with me. Give me clarity despite anxiety." I led the response for 12 hours straight, triaging patients, coordinating care, making life and death decisions. The anxiety was present throughout, but so was peace. We saved every savable life that day, lost 3 patients whose injuries were too severe, and through it all, I felt both the weight of responsibility and the lightness of God's peace. Afterward, exhausted and emotionally drained, I sat in my office. Dr. Reyes came in. "That was incredible leadership. How are you holding up?" "Exhausted, sad about the patients we lost, but at peace. I did everything I could. The outcomes were in God's hands, not mine. I would have fallen apart. The pressure, the decisions, the stakes. 6 months ago I would have too, but I've learned that God's peace is available even in impossible situations, not because I'm strong, but because He is." That evening I went to the Adoration Chapel. I sat in the quiet and cried, for the patients who died, for the families who'd lost loved ones, for the weight of leadership. And as I cried, I felt God's peace, not removing the grief, not fixing the tragedy, but present with me in it. "Thank you," I prayed, "for teaching me that peace doesn't mean absence of pain. It means your presence in pain. Today was hard. I'm grieving, but I'm not alone in it. Your peace holds me even when circumstances are devastating." At my 6-month review as department head, the hospital administrator praised my leadership. "You've transformed the department. Staff morale is up. Patient outcomes are excellent, and your handling of crisis situations has been exemplary. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I've learned to lead from peace despite anxiety, to make decisions trusting God with outcomes I can't control, and to be honest about my struggles instead of pretending to be invincible. That honesty is part of why staff respects you. You're human, vulnerable, real, but you're also competent and grounded. It's a powerful combination." I wrote in my journal that night, 6 months as department head, 6 months of proving that anxiety doesn't disqualify me from leadership, 6 months of experiencing God's peace in impossible situations. The anxiety hasn't disappeared, probably never will, but I've learned to lead anxious, to make decisions despite fear, to find peace in God's presence regardless of circumstances. This isn't the life I imagined when I was drowning in anxiety a year ago. It's better, because I'm not waiting for anxiety to disappear to live fully. I'm living fully with anxiety, sustained by God's peace that transcends my mental state. I thought about the mass casualty event, about the patients saved and lost, about leading through crisis while anxious. And I realized this was exactly what God meant when He said my anxious mind would find peace in Him. Not peace that removed anxiety or prevented difficult circumstances, but peace that held me through anxiety and circumstances, allowing me to function, to lead, to live fully despite struggles. The anxiety of my mind was finding peace in Him, and that peace was enabling life I'd thought was impossible for someone with my mental health struggles. 1 year after God spoke to me, I met someone who would challenge everything I'd learned about anxiety and peace in the most unexpected way. Her name was Maya, and she was a new psychiatrist at the hospital. She specialized in anxiety disorders and had been hired to develop a mental health program for hospital staff, a position created partly because of my advocacy for physician mental health. We met at a staff meeting where she was presenting about burnout and anxiety in healthcare workers. Her presentation was brilliant, evidence-based, compassionate and honest about her own struggles with anxiety. "I'm a psychiatrist with generalized anxiety disorder," she said to a room full of physicians. "Some might see that as ironic. I see it as qualification. Who better to treat anxiety than someone who lives with it?" After the meeting, I introduced myself. "That was powerful. Thank you for being honest about your own anxiety. You're Dr. Hayes. I've read your blog. Your writing about finding peace despite anxiety has helped me articulate things to my patients. Your presentation reminded me that I'm not alone in this, that anxiety in healthcare is common, not shameful." We started having coffee regularly, discussing mental health, faith, and the intersection of the two. Maya was Jewish, and her perspective on finding peace in God was different but complementary to mine. In Judaism, we have a concept called shalom, peace. It doesn't mean absence of conflict or difficulty. It means wholeness, completeness, even in the midst of struggle. That's exactly what I've been learning. Peace that coexists with anxiety, not peace that requires anxiety to disappear. Exactly. My anxiety makes me a better psychiatrist. It gives me empathy for my patients, but it also requires daily management, medication, therapy, spiritual practices. Over the following months, Maya and I grew closer. Coffee became dinners. Professional conversations became personal ones, and I found myself falling for her. But the anxiety came with it. What if she doesn't feel the same? What if I ruin our friendship? What if a relationship with her triggers my anxiety in ways I can't handle? I brought it to the support group. I'm interested in someone, but I'm terrified. My last relationship ended because of my anxiety. What if history repeats? Eleanor said, "You're not the same person you were with Rachel. You've spent a year learning to manage anxiety, to find peace despite it. Don't let fear of repeating the past keep you from experiencing the present." Tom added, "Besides, she's a psychiatrist who specializes in anxiety. If anyone understands, it's her." They were right. But knowing that didn't eliminate the anxiety. It just meant I had to act despite it. I asked Maya to dinner, not as colleagues, but as something more. "I'd like to take you out, not for coffee as friends, but as a date." She smiled. "I was wondering when you'd ask." Yes. Our first date was perfect and terrifying. I was anxious the entire time, worried about saying the wrong thing, worried she'd see my anxiety as a deal breaker, worried I'd have a panic attack. But I also felt peace, God's peace that said I could be anxious and still be present, still be myself, still take the risk of opening my heart again. "You seem nervous," Maya said halfway through dinner. "I am. I'm anxious about this. About whether I'm ready for a relationship, about whether my anxiety will be too much for you." "Adrian, I treat anxiety disorders. I have an anxiety disorder. I'm not scared of your anxiety. I'm interested in you, all of you, including the anxious parts." Her acceptance was healing in ways I didn't expect. Rachel had loved me despite my anxiety. Maya loved me including my anxiety. The difference was profound. Over the following months, we navigated dating while both managing anxiety disorders. Some days were hard, both of us anxious, both needing reassurance, both struggling, but we learned to support each other. When she was anxious, I'd remind her, "God's peace is available to you right now. You're not alone in this." When I was anxious, she'd remind me, "You've survived every anxious moment before. You'll survive this one too." At therapy, Dr. Martinez helped me process the relationship. How is dating Maya different from dating Rachel? Rachel saw my anxiety as something to fix. Maya sees it as something to manage. Rachel needed me to be less anxious. Maya accepts that I'm anxious and loves me anyway. That's healthy partnership. Not someone who completes you or fixes you, but someone who walks alongside you in your struggles. I'm also learning that two anxious people can have a healthy relationship. We both understand what it's like. We're both committed to managing our mental health. We don't make each other responsible for regulating our anxiety. That's maturity. Relationships where both people are healthy enough to handle their own struggles while supporting each other, those are the ones that last. 6 months into dating Maya, I faced a major anxiety trigger. She was offered a position at Johns Hopkins, one of the most prestigious psychiatry departments in the country. It's an incredible opportunity, she told me, clearly torn. But it means moving to Baltimore, and I don't want to lose what we have. My anxiety spiked immediately. What if she leaves? What if long distance doesn't work? What if I have to choose between my career here and following her? But I also felt God's peace underneath the anxiety. Let's not make any decisions based on fear. Let's pray about it, think about it, and trust that God's already in whatever future we choose. We spent weeks discussing options. She could turn down Hopkins. I could look for positions in Baltimore. We could try long distance. Each option had pros and cons. Each triggered anxiety. Finally, Maya said, I don't want to make a decision based on our relationship being fragile. I trust what we have. I'm going to accept Hopkins, and we'll figure out how to make it work. Are you sure? I'm anxious about it, but I'm also at peace. God brought us together. He'll sustain us through this transition. Her faith steadied me, and I realized she was practicing what I'd been learning, feeling anxiety while choosing trust, finding peace in God's presence despite uncertain circumstances. We decided I'd stay in Chicago for now, but start looking for positions in Baltimore. Long distance for a year while I completed some projects and she settled into Hopkins. The night before she left, we sat in the Adoration Chapel together, her first time there. This is where it started for me, I told her, where God told me the anxiety of my mind finds peace in Him, where I learned that peace and anxiety could coexist. It's peaceful here. I can see why you come. I'm anxious about you leaving, about long distance, about the unknowns. Me too. But I'm also at peace, not because I know how it will work out, but because I trust God's presence in our future. How did you get so wise about this? From you. From watching you live what you've learned. You've taught me that anxiety doesn't have to control our decisions, that we can be anxious and still move forward, that God's peace is available regardless of circumstances. Long distance was harder than either of us expected. Video calls weren't the same as being together. The anxiety about the relationship surviving increased. But we both kept returning to the truth. God's peace was available to us, despite the difficulty. I visited Baltimore monthly. Maya came to Chicago when she could, and we both continued our individual therapy, our medications, our spiritual practices. We didn't make the relationship responsible for our peace. We each found peace in God and brought that peace to the relationship. At the support group I shared about long distance. It's hard being apart. The anxiety tries to convince me she'll lose interest, that this won't work. But I keep reminding myself, God's already in our future. I don't have to see how it works out to trust that He's in it. Elena said, you're modeling something important for us, that we can face difficult circumstances anxiously but peacefully, that anxiety doesn't have to determine our choices. The hospital in Chicago offered me a research position that would allow me to work remotely part-time, meaning I could spend more time in Baltimore while maintaining my connection to Chicago. It felt like God's provision. Not perfect circumstances, but a path forward I couldn't have orchestrated. 8 months into long distance, I had a severe anxiety episode, multiple panic attacks, couldn't sleep, catastrophizing about everything. The old patterns I thought I'd overcome came roaring back. I called Maya at 2 a.m., hyperventilating. I can't do this. The anxiety is too much. I feel like I'm falling apart. Adrian, breathe with me. You're having a panic attack, but you're safe. You've survived these before. She stayed on the phone for an hour, talking me through it, and when I'd calmed down, she said, "You're not falling apart. You're having a rough episode. There's a difference. This doesn't mean you've lost all your progress. It means you're human, and anxiety sometimes spikes." I thought I was past this. You're not past anxiety. You're learning to live with it. Some seasons are harder than others. That's okay. God's peace is still available to you, even in your worst moments. Her words reminded me of what I'd forgotten in the panic. Peace wasn't dependent on anxiety being manageable. It was available even when anxiety felt overwhelming. I took a few days off work, increased my therapy sessions, and recommitted to my spiritual practices. The episode passed, but it humbled me. I wasn't cured of anxiety. I was managing a chronic condition that would require ongoing attention. At my annual review, the hospital administrator asked about my plans. "I'm likely moving to Baltimore in 6 months. My girlfriend is at Hopkins, and I've found a position there that excites me. We'll be sorry to lose you, but we're grateful for what you've built here. The mental health program for staff, the culture of openness about mental health, that's your legacy. Thank you. This place saved my life. When I was drowning in anxiety, you gave me space to get help. I'll always be grateful." I wrote in my journal that night. 1 year ago, I couldn't imagine being in a healthy relationship, couldn't imagine leading a department, couldn't imagine having influence that helped others with mental health. But God's peace has enabled all of it, not by removing anxiety, but by being present in it. I'm still anxious, probably always will be, but I've learned that anxiety doesn't disqualify me from love, leadership, or making a difference. God's peace sustains me through it all. Maya and I got engaged 3 months later. She proposed to me, actually, very psychiatrist-like. She'd thought through all the timing and logistics. I know we're both anxious people. I know relationships require work. But I also know that God's peace is available to us as a couple, and I want to spend my life with you, navigating anxiety together, finding peace together. I said yes through tears, anxious tears and peaceful tears simultaneously. Planning a wedding triggered both of our anxiety disorders. So many decisions, so many things that could go wrong, so many people to coordinate. But we kept reminding each other, God's peace is available to us in wedding planning, not just after the wedding. At the support group, I shared the news. I'm getting married to another anxious person. We'll be 2 anxiety disorders trying to build a life together. Tom laughed. That actually sounds perfect. You both understand. You both know how to find peace despite anxiety. You both have tools for managing it. I never thought I'd get married. After Rachel left, I believed my anxiety made me unlovable. But Maya sees my anxiety as part of me, not as a flaw to fix. That's healing. Elena smiled. That's what we all need, people who love us, including our struggles, not despite them. The anxiety of my mind was still finding peace in God. But now I had a partner who understood that journey, who walked it with me, who knew that peace and anxiety could coexist. And that partnership was teaching me that God's peace wasn't just for individual hearts. It was for relationships, for shared journeys, for 2 anxious people learning to love each other and God together. 2 years after God spoke to me, Maya and I got married in a small ceremony that perfectly reflected who we were. 2 anxious people committing to a life of finding peace in God together. The wedding itself was anxiety-inducing, family dynamics, logistics being the center of attention. Both Maya and I had panic attacks during the week leading up to it, but we also had peace, God's peace that held us through the anxiety. Standing at the altar, I felt both terrified and profoundly peaceful. Maya's hands were shaking as we exchanged vows, but her voice was steady. "I promise to love you, anxiety and all, to remind you of God's peace when you forget, to walk with you through panic attacks and peaceful moments, to build a life where our mental health struggles don't define us, but also aren't hidden." My own vows reflected the journey. 2 years ago, I was drowning in anxiety. God taught me that my anxious mind could find peace in Him. You've taught me that anxious people can love deeply, build healthy relationships, and create beautiful lives. I promise to be your partner in finding peace, to hold your anxiety without trying to fix it, and to trust God's presence in our marriage." There wasn't a dry eye in the small chapel, not because it was a perfect fairy tale wedding, but because it was real. Two broken people, both managing mental illness, choosing each other and choosing to trust God with their future. The honeymoon in Ireland was both wonderful and challenging. Being in a foreign country triggered some of Maya's anxiety. Fear of the unfamiliar, worry about health emergencies far from home. I had my own triggers. Long flights, being out of routine, unpredictable schedules, but we navigated it together. When she was anxious, I'd remind her, God's peace is available to you right here in Ireland, not just at home. When I was anxious, she'd ground me. You're safe. We're together. This anxiety will pass. One evening in Dublin, after a particularly anxiety-filled day, we sat in a small church, similar to the one where God had first spoken to me. "Do you ever wonder if we're crazy?" Maya asked. Two psychiatrists, both on anxiety medication, both in therapy, both still struggling. Shouldn't we have it more together? We have it exactly as together as we need to. We're not pretending to be perfect. We're managing chronic conditions that require daily attention. That's wisdom, not failure. I know, but sometimes I feel like I should be beyond this by now. You'll never be beyond anxiety. Neither will I, but we're learning to live fully with it. That's actually more impressive than being beyond it. She leaned against me. Thank you for understanding. Rachel didn't understand. Not her fault, but she couldn't grasp what it was like. You get it, because I live it too. We're both learning that God's peace is deeper than our anxiety. Some days we remember that easily. Some days we forget and have to remind each other. We moved to Baltimore after the honeymoon. I took a position at Johns Hopkins in their emergency medicine department with a focus on physician mental health. Maya continued her work in psychiatry. Living together brought new challenges. Two people with anxiety disorders, different triggers, different coping mechanisms, learning to coexist. Maya needed more structure and routine to manage her anxiety. I needed more flexibility and spontaneity to avoid feeling controlled. We had to negotiate, compromise, extend grace. One Saturday morning, I wanted to go on an impromptu hike. Maya needed to stick to her planned schedule: grocery shopping, meal prep, household tasks. I feel suffocated by constant planning, I admitted. I feel anxious without structure, she countered. We were both right, and both anxious about the other's needs. Finally, I suggested, let's pray about it. Ask God to help us find peace with each other's different ways of managing anxiety. We sat together, holding hands, and prayed. And afterward, we found a compromise. We'd do her planned tasks first, then have spontaneous afternoon time. Structure and flexibility coexisting, just like anxiety and peace. These small negotiations taught us that marriage wasn't about fixing each other's anxiety. It was about supporting each other through it while maintaining our own peace in God. At Johns Hopkins, I developed a physician wellness program that addressed mental health openly. Many doctors struggled with anxiety, depression, burnout, but few sought help because of stigma. Mental illness doesn't disqualify you from medicine, I told a group of residents. I'm department director with generalized anxiety disorder. I take medication, I'm in therapy, and I'm competent at my job. Your mental health is health. Treat it that way. One resident approached me afterward, crying. I've been having panic attacks for months. I thought I had to hide it, that admitting it would ruin my career. Hiding it is what ruins careers. Getting help preserves them. I almost lost everything before I got help. Don't make my mistakes. The wellness program became a model for other hospitals. I was invited to speak nationally about physician mental health, always sharing my own story. But the speaking triggered anxiety, large crowds being vulnerable publicly, fear of judgment. Before each talk, I'd pray, God, the anxiety of my mind finds peace in you. Help me speak from that peace, not from fear. Maya and I decided to start trying for a baby. The decision triggered anxiety for both of us. What if my anxiety genes affect the baby? I worried. What if I pass this on? Anxiety has genetic components, yes, Maya said clinically, but it also has environmental factors. If our child has anxiety, they'll have parents who understand it, who know how to help, who can teach them young what we learned late. You're right, but I'm still scared. Me too. But we can't let fear of potential anxiety prevent us from building the family we want. God's peace is available to us as anxious parents, not just as anxiety-free ones. Getting pregnant took longer than we expected, which triggered more anxiety. What if we can't have children? What if something's wrong? What if this never happens? Dr. Martinez helped me process. You're catastrophizing again. Difficulty conceiving isn't rare, but your anxiety is creating worst-case scenarios. I know, but knowing it's anxiety doesn't make it less real. That's true. So let's practice what you've learned. Acknowledge the anxiety, don't fight it, and find God's peace alongside it. Maya got pregnant after 8 months of trying. The joy was immense, but so was the anxiety, for both of us. As a physician, I knew everything that could go wrong during pregnancy. As a psychiatrist, Maya knew how pregnancy hormones could affect anxiety. We were the world's most anxious expecting parents. Every appointment triggered anxiety. Every symptom was catastrophized. We had to keep reminding each other, God's peace is available to us as anxious parents-to-be. At 12 weeks, Maya had severe bleeding. We rushed to the ER, my ER, where my colleagues took care of my terrified wife. I sat in the waiting room praying desperately, God, please let the baby be okay, please. But underneath the desperate prayer, I felt peace, not certainty that everything would be fine, but certainty that God was present regardless of outcome. The ultrasound showed a heartbeat. The baby was okay. The bleeding was a benign subchorionic hematoma. Relief flooded through me. But the scare reminded me, even with God's peace, life brought real crises. Peace didn't prevent difficulty, it sustained through difficulty. The support group celebrated our pregnancy. Many members had their own children, understood the unique anxiety of parenting while managing anxiety disorders. Elena, now a good friend, said, "You'll be amazing parents. Your child will grow up knowing that anxiety is manageable, not shameful. That's a gift." Tom added, "And they'll learn young what you learned late. That God's peace is available regardless of circumstances." I hope so, but I'm terrified of passing on my anxiety, of not being able to help them if they struggle. Adrian, you're one of the most equipped people I know to parent an anxious child, and if they don't struggle with anxiety, you'll teach them compassion for people who do. His words helped. I couldn't control whether our child would have anxiety. I could only control how I responded if they did. Maya's anxiety intensified during pregnancy. Hormones made it harder to manage. She increased therapy frequency, adjusted medication under close supervision, and leaned heavily on spiritual practices. "I feel like I'm failing at pregnancy," she admitted one evening. "I should be glowing and peaceful. Instead, I'm anxious and medicated." "You're not failing. You're managing a chronic condition while growing a human. That's incredible, not inadequate. I'm supposed to be a psychiatrist. I should know how to handle this better. Maya, you know intellectually that pregnancy can exacerbate anxiety, but knowing it and experiencing it are different. Give yourself the same compassion you'd give a patient." She started crying. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Supporting her through pregnancy anxiety while managing my own was challenging, but it also deepened our partnership. We were learning to hold space for each other's struggles without trying to fix them. At 6 months pregnant, Maya had a severe panic attack that landed her in the ER, my ER again. Sitting with her while she hyperventilated, heart racing, convinced something was wrong with the baby, I felt both helpless and grounded. "Maya, you're safe. The baby's safe. This is a panic attack. You've survived hundreds of these." "What if it's not? What if something's really wrong? Then we'll handle it. But right now, all evidence says it's anxiety. Breathe with me. After we confirmed the baby was fine, after her panic subsided, we sat together in the hospital room. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should be able to handle this better." "Stop apologizing for being human. You're managing pregnancy and anxiety disorder. That's hard. God's peace is available to you even in panic attacks, even when you feel like you're failing. How do you always remember that? How do you always find peace?" "I don't always. Sometimes I forget and spiral just like you. But I've been practicing for 2 years now, remembering that God's peace is deeper than my anxiety. It's become more automatic, but it's still a practice." Our daughter Sophia was born on a Tuesday morning after 20 hours of labor. The birth was complicated: emergency C-section, scary moments, uncertainty about outcomes. Throughout, I felt both overwhelming anxiety and profound peace, fear that something would go wrong, but trust that God was present regardless. When they finally placed Sophia in my arms, I cried. Relief, joy, fear, gratitude, all mixed together. "She's perfect," Maya whispered, exhausted but glowing. "She is. And God's already in her future, already holding her, already loving her even more than we do." The first few weeks of parenthood were the hardest of my life. Sleep deprivation, constant worry about Sophia's health, anxiety about being a good father, adjusting to new routines. Maya struggled with postpartum anxiety and depression. She'd expected it. It's common, especially with pre-existing anxiety. But knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. "I can't stop worrying about her," she said one night at 3 a.m., having checked on Sophia for the 10th time. "What if she stops breathing? What if PSYDS? What if something happens and I don't catch it? Maya, you need to call your psychiatrist. This isn't normal new parent worry. This is postpartum anxiety. I'm already on medication, already in therapy. What more can I do?" Increase medication, increase therapy frequency, and remember, God's peace is available to you as an anxious new mother. She adjusted her medication and started intensive therapy. Slowly, the postpartum anxiety became more manageable. But it taught us both. Anxiety doesn't take breaks for major life events. If anything, it intensifies during stress. Sophia was 3 months old when I had my worst panic attack in years. Full-blown, couldn't breathe, convinced I was dying, had to call 911. Maya, still managing her own postpartum anxiety, talked me through it while simultaneously caring for our crying baby. "Adrian, breathe. You're not dying. This is a panic attack. You're safe." The paramedics confirmed it was anxiety, not a heart attack. Embarrassing for an ER physician to call 911 for a panic attack, but necessary. "I thought I was past this," I told Dr. Martinez the next day. 2 years of progress, and I'm back to calling 911 for panic attacks." "You're not back to anything. You had one severe panic attack during one of the most stressful periods of life. New baby, sleep deprivation, major life changes. That doesn't erase 2 years of growth. But I should be able to handle this." Adrian, should is anxiety talking. Reality is, you're human, you have an anxiety disorder, and sometimes it spikes. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you need additional support right now. I increased my therapy frequency and adjusted medication. The panic attacks became less frequent, though anxiety remained elevated. At the support group, which I'd been attending less frequently due to the baby, I shared my struggles. I'm embarrassed. I teach others about managing anxiety, and I can barely manage my own right now. Elena said gently, "Adrian, you've taught us that managing anxiety doesn't mean never struggling. It means having tools for when we do struggle. You're using your tools, therapy, medication, spiritual practices. That's success, not failure. I just feel like I should be better at this by now." Tom added, "You'll never be done with anxiety. It's a chronic condition. Some seasons are harder than others. This is a hard season. New baby, sleep deprivation, massive life changes. Of course, your anxiety is elevated. That's normal." Their grace was healing. I'd been holding myself to an impossible standard. expecting anxiety to never spike, never overwhelm, never require increased support. At 6 months old, Sophia smiled for the first time, a real, genuine smile. In that moment, holding my daughter, watching her joy, I felt both anxiety and peace so intensely. Anxiety about all the ways I could fail her as a father. Peace from knowing God loved her more than I did and was already in her future. God, I prayed silently, thank you for this gift. Thank you that the anxiety of my mind finds peace in you. Help me be the father she needs, anxious but present, struggling but faithful. Maya and I started having weekly anxiety check-ins, dedicated time to share what we were anxious about, how we were managing, what we needed from each other. I'm anxious about going back to work, she shared. Anxious about leaving Sophia, anxious about balancing motherhood and career. I'm anxious about being a good father, about passing on my anxiety, about whether I can handle my job and parenting well. We're both anxious people trying to raise a baby. What were we thinking? I laughed. We were thinking that God's peace is available to anxious parents, that our anxiety doesn't disqualify us from family, that we can do hard things with God's help. You're right, I just forget sometimes. Me too. That's why we check in, to remind each other of truth when anxiety feels overwhelming. Writing in my journal became harder with a baby. Less time, less energy, less mental space, but I carved out moments to reflect. 2 years since God told me, the anxiety of my mind finds peace in Him. Becoming a father has tested that truth in new ways. Some days I feel peace easily. Some days anxiety overwhelms, and I have to fight to remember God's presence. But the trajectory is clear. I'm learning to parent anxiously but faithfully, to love my daughter despite fear, to trust God with her future even when I can't see it. Sophia will grow up with anxious parents who know how to find peace. That's not ideal in some ways. I wish we could give her anxiety-free parents. But it's real, and maybe that authenticity will serve her better than pretend perfection ever could. At Sophia's first birthday, surrounded by family and friends, I reflected on the year, the hardest year of my life: sleep deprivation, postpartum anxiety, Maya's, panic attacks, mine, learning to parent while managing mental illness. But also the best year, watching Sophia grow, falling more in love with Maya, learning that anxiety doesn't prevent joy, it just makes us more intentional about finding it. Making a toast, I said, 2 anxious people having a baby seemed crazy to some. But Sophia has taught us that God's peace is available in every season, including the hardest ones. She's growing up with parents who don't hide their struggles, who seek help when needed, who trust God deeply. That's the legacy we want to give her, not perfection, but authenticity and faith. Later, after everyone left, Maya and I sat with sleeping Sophia between us. We did it. We survived year 1. We did more than survive. We thrived, anxiously but authentically. Thank you for being my partner in this, for understanding, for not expecting me to be anything other than who I am. Thank you for the same, for showing me that anxious people can build beautiful lives, that God's peace really is deeper than any anxiety. We sat in comfortable silence, watching our daughter sleep, both feeling anxiety about the future and peace about God's presence in it. The anxiety of our minds was finding peace in Him, together. 5 years after God spoke to me, I faced a crisis that would test everything I'd learned about finding peace amid anxiety. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at 68 years old. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. My sister Emma's voice was shaking. "Adrian, it's Mom." The neurologist confirmed it. Early onset Alzheimer's. I felt my chest tighten immediately, the familiar physical sensation of anxiety flooding my body. My mother, vibrant, sharp, the woman who'd raised me, was going to slowly disappear. "How advanced is it?" I asked, slipping into physician mode. "Stage 2. She's forgetting recent things, getting confused. The doctor says it will progress." After hanging up, I sat in my office, unable to move. The anxiety was overwhelming, not just about Mum's diagnosis, but about what it meant for me genetically, for my future, for Sophia's potential inheritance. Maya found me there an hour later. I heard, "I'm so sorry. What if I get it? What if Sophia gets it? Anxiety runs in my family. Now Alzheimer's too. What if I'm watching my future in my mother's decline? Adrian, you're catastrophizing. One diagnosis doesn't mean I'm a physician. I know the statistics. I know the genetic components. This isn't catastrophizing. It's realistic risk assessment." She sat beside me. "It's both. Yes, there's increased risk, but you're also jumping to worst-case scenarios about your future and Sophia's. That's anxiety." She was right. I was spiraling into the what-ifs that characterized my anxiety disorder, but this time the what-ifs felt more grounded in reality than usual. That evening, I sat in the Adoration Chapel, my regular refuge when anxiety overwhelmed. God, I'm terrified. Not just of losing Mom, but of what this means for my future. I've spent 5 years learning that my anxious mind finds peace in you. But this feels different. This feels like my fears are coming true. As I sat in the silence, I felt God's presence, not removing the fear, not eliminating the reality of the diagnosis, but present with me in it. And I remembered, the anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. Not peace because circumstances are good, but peace because I'm present in all circumstances. Even in this, I asked, even in watching my mother disappear? Even in facing my own potential future? I felt clearly, especially in this. My peace is deepest in your darkest moments. I flew home to Chicago that weekend. Mom seemed mostly herself, a few memory lapses, some confusion about dates, but still the mother I knew. "Adrian, how's my granddaughter?" she asked. "Sophia's great, Mom. She's 5 now. Just started kindergarten." 5 already? I could have sworn she was just born. Emma caught my eye. This was it, the beginning of losing her to the disease. Over dinner, Mom asked about Sophia 3 more times, forgetting she'd already asked. Each time broke my heart a little more. "How are you handling this?" Emma asked when Mom went to bed. "I'm not. I'm anxious about everything. Her decline, my risk, Sophia's risk. I keep catastrophizing about the future. But you've learned to manage anxiety, all your work, your talks, your program at Hopkins. Doesn't that help?" It helps, but this is testing everything I thought I knew. It's one thing to manage anxiety about hypothetical futures. It's another to face a reality that confirms your worst fears. Back in Baltimore, I struggled. My anxiety spiked to levels I hadn't experienced in years. I was obsessively researching Alzheimer's genetics, checking myself for early symptoms, convinced every forgotten word was the beginning of dementia. At therapy, Dr. Martinez, still my therapist after 5 years, recognized the pattern immediately. "Your health anxiety spiraling. Your mother's diagnosis has triggered fears about your own cognitive health. But they're rational fears. The statistics are still just statistics. Yes, you have increased risk, but you're catastrophizing that increased risk into certainty. That's anxiety, not reality. How do I find peace when the thing I've been anxious about is actually happening?" The same way you've been finding peace for 5 years, by remembering that God's presence doesn't depend on circumstances, by managing your anxiety with tools you already have, by not letting fear of a potential future rob your present peace. She was right, but implementing it was harder than ever. Maya noticed my obsessive health checking. "Adrian, you've checked yourself for Alzheimer's symptoms 4 times today. That's anxiety, not health awareness. What if I'm already showing signs? You're 43 and under immense stress. Forgetting where you put your keys is stress, not dementia." But how do I know?" "You don't. That's what anxiety hates, uncertainty. But you've learned to live with uncertainty in other areas. You need to practice that here." The support group became essential again. I'd been attending less regularly. Life with a 5-year-old left little time, but I needed them now. "My mom has Alzheimer's," I shared, "and I'm spiraling, convinced I'm going to get it, obsessively checking myself for symptoms. I feel like I'm back where I started 5 years ago." Tom, now a dear friend, said, "You're not back where you started. 5 years ago you didn't have tools. Now you do. You're just in a crisis that requires using them more intentionally. Elena added, your mother's diagnosis is a real crisis, not imagined. Of course your anxiety is elevated. That's normal, but you know how to find peace despite anxiety. You've done it thousands of times. But this time, the thing I've been anxious about is actually real. That feels different. A newer member, David, spoke up. I lost my father to ALS. Spent years terrified I'd get it because it can be genetic. But my therapist told me something that helped. Don't borrow suffering from a future that may never come. Today, you're healthy. Live today fully. Trust God with tomorrow. That's what you've been teaching us. He was right. I'd been teaching about finding peace despite uncertain futures. Now I had to practice it in the hardest way. I started visiting Mom monthly. Each visit showed more decline. She'd forget conversations we'd just had, confuse me with my father sometimes, get lost in her own house. The anxiety about my own future persisted, but I was learning to acknowledge it without letting it control me. God, I'm scared I'll end up like Mom. I'm terrified of Sophia watching me disappear the way I'm watching Mom disappear. But you, said my anxious mind, finds peace in you. Help me trust that your peace is available even in this fear. Sophia started asking questions about Grandma. Why does Grandma forget things? She has a sickness called Alzheimer's. It makes her brain not work as well as it used to. Will she die? Maya and I had discussed this. We wanted to be honest with Sophia, not shield her from reality. Eventually, yes, the sickness will get worse over time. That's very sad, and it's okay to feel sad about it. Are you sad, Daddy? Very sad, and also a little scared. Scared of what? Scared that I might get the same sickness someday. Maya shot me a look. We hadn't planned to share that with Sophia, but it had slipped out in my honesty. Will you? Sophia asked, worried now. I don't know. Maybe. But God's with me whether I get sick or not, and God's with Grandma right now in her sickness. Later, Maya questioned my honesty with Sophia. Was that appropriate? She's 5. Does she need to know you're worried about getting Alzheimer's? Probably not. But she asked if I was scared, and I was honest. I don't want to teach her to hide anxiety. There's a difference between being honest about emotions and burdening her with adult fears. She was right. I'd let my anxiety overflow onto Sophia inappropriately. I apologized to both of them, but the conversation led to a good discussion with Sophia about anxiety. Daddy has anxiety, which means my brain worries a lot about things. That's why I see a doctor who helps me with worrying. It's okay to worry sometimes, but we don't want worry to be in charge. Does Mommy have anxiety too? Maya nodded. I do, so we're both learning to give our worries to God and trust Him. What if I get anxiety? Then we'll help you. We know a lot about anxiety, and we know that people with anxiety can have wonderful, full lives. At work, my mother's diagnosis affected my approach to the physician wellness program. I started addressing anticipatory grief, physicians dealing with aging parents, facing their own mortality, worrying about genetic health risks. Many of us in medicine know too much, I told a group of residents. We see the statistics, know the risks, understand disease progression. That knowledge can fuel anxiety. I'm living this right now. My mother has Alzheimer's, and I'm managing anxiety about my own risk. But I'm learning that God's peace is available even when our worst fears are realized. One resident asked, how do you not spiral into constant health anxiety? How do you work in medicine without constantly diagnosing yourself? I do sometimes spiral, but I've learned to recognize it and redirect. When I catch myself obsessively health checking, I pray, God, the anxiety of my mind finds peace in you. That doesn't eliminate the anxiety, but it reminds me I'm not alone in it. Mom's decline accelerated over the following year. She stopped recognizing Emma sometimes, started having trouble with basic tasks, required more care than Dad could provide alone. The decision to move her to memory care was agonizing. Dad called me devastated. I feel like I'm abandoning her. Dad, you're not. You're ensuring she gets the care she needs. That's love, not abandonment. I promised her 50 years ago I'd never put her in a home. You promised 50 years ago before Alzheimer's existed in your marriage. This isn't the situation you promised about. But his guilt resonated with my own anxiety. What if Maya had to make this choice about me someday? What if Sophia had to? At the memory care facility, Mum seemed content but distant. She didn't recognize me at all. "Who's this nice young man?" she asked a nurse. "That's your son, Adrian, Margaret. He's come to visit you." "I don't have a son named Adrian." Driving away, I cried harder than I had in years. My mother was gone, even though she was still alive. The woman who'd raised me, encouraged me, supported me through my anxiety breakdown. She didn't know I existed anymore. Maya held me that night while I grieved. "I'm so sorry, I know how hard this is. I keep seeing my future. That could be me in 20 years. Sophia visiting someone who used to be her father. It might not be. Genetics increase risk, but they don't guarantee it. But what if it is? What if I disappear like Mom? Then we'll handle it. Sophia will handle it. But we can't live today governed by fear of a tomorrow that might never come. God's peace is available now, not just in hypothetical futures." Her words echoed what I'd been teaching for years, but living it when it was my mother, my potential future, was exponentially harder than teaching it in abstract. The support group rallied around me. Elena brought meals. Tom came over just to sit with me. David shared about his father's ALS and how he'd learned to live fully despite genetic risk. "I could get tested to see if I have the gene," David said, "but I decided not to. Knowing wouldn't change anything. I can't prevent it, but it might rob my peace. So I choose to trust God with my future and live fully in my present." Do you ever regret that choice? Sometimes, when I'm anxious, I want certainty, but I've learned certainty is an illusion. The only certainty I have is that God's with me, whatever my genetic future holds. His wisdom helped me decide not to pursue genetic testing for Alzheimer's markers, knowing my risk percentage wouldn't change anything, but it might fuel my anxiety. Instead, I focused on what I could control: healthy lifestyle, cognitive exercises, staying socially connected, managing my anxiety disorder well. The rest was in God's hands. Writing became therapeutic. I started a new blog series about navigating anticipatory grief and health anxiety while maintaining faith. I don't know if I'll get Alzheimer's. Statistics say my risk is elevated. Anxiety says it's inevitable. But faith says God's with me regardless. So I'm choosing to live today fully, trusting tomorrow to God's care. That's not denial, it's wisdom. It's refusing to let fear of a potential future rob the peace available in my present. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people shared their own experiences with genetic health risks, anticipatory grief, and learning to find peace despite uncertainty. One email particularly moved me. "I've lived for 15 years terrified I'd get my mother's breast cancer. Your writing showed me I've been letting fear of the future rob my present peace. I'm choosing differently now. Thank you." These testimonies reminded me why I'd learned about God's peace, to help others discover it too, even in the hardest circumstances. At Sophia's 6th birthday party, surrounded by her friends and laughter, I felt both joy and melancholy. Joy in this moment. Melancholy, wondering if I'd remember her 7th birthday, her 10th, her 16th. Maya caught me spiraling. "You're here now. Be present. Don't rob this moment by fearing future moments you might miss." She was right. I took a breath, prayed silently, "God, help me be present in this joy despite fear of the future," and re-engaged with Sophia's party. Later, putting Sophia to bed, she said, "Daddy, you seemed sad at my party." I was a little sad thinking about Grandma, but I was also very happy celebrating you. Can you be sad and happy at the same time? Yes, just like you can be anxious and peaceful at the same time. Feelings are complicated. Are you anxious now? A little. But I'm also peaceful because I know God's with us. God's with Grandma too, even though she's sick? Yes, God's especially with people who are sick or sad or scared. That's good. I'm glad God's with Grandma. Her simple faith steadied me. God was with Mom, even in her disappearance. God was with me, even in my anxiety about following her path. God was with Sophia, whatever genetic legacy she'd inherited. 5 years after learning that my anxious mind could find peace in God, I was discovering that peace wasn't just for hypothetical fears. It was for realized ones, for watching my worst fears unfold, for facing genetic risks I couldn't control. The anxiety hadn't disappeared. If anything, Mom's diagnosis had proven that some of my lifelong anxieties were grounded in reality. But God's peace was deeper than the reality of my fears. His presence was more certain than any genetic risk. His love was more powerful than any disease. I wrote in my journal, 5 years of learning that my anxious mind finds peace in God. Mom's Alzheimer's is testing that truth in the hardest way, but even here, especially here, God's peace is real. Not peace that removes the diagnosis or eliminates my risk, but peace that holds me through it, peace that reminds me God's in my future, whatever it holds, peace that lets me live today without being controlled by fear of tomorrow. This is what it means to find peace in God, not peace that depends on circumstances, but peace that exists regardless of them. The anxiety of my mind was finding peace in Him, especially, when my worst fears were realized. 7 years after God spoke to me, I faced a crisis that would redefine everything I thought I understood about anxiety and peace. Sophia, now 7 years old, started showing signs of anxiety disorder, the very thing I'd feared most since her birth. It started subtly. She'd always been a cautious child, thoughtful and careful, but over the course of several months, Maya and I noticed changes. She started asking repetitive questions, seeking constant reassurance. She worried excessively about health, about us dying, about catastrophes that might happen. "Daddy, what if you get in a car accident?" she'd ask every morning before I left for work. "I'll be careful, sweetheart." "But what if you are careful and it happens anyway? What if you die and never come home?" At first, I attributed it to normal childhood fears, but as a psychiatrist, Maya recognized the patterns immediately. "Adrian, I think Sophia has anxiety disorder. The catastrophic thinking, the need for reassurance, the repetitive worrying. Those aren't normal developmental fears." My heart sank. The thing I'd most feared, passing my anxiety to my daughter, was happening. "It's my fault," I said immediately. "My genetics, my anxiety genes. It's not fault, it's genetics, yes, but also environmental factors, temperament, many things. And Adrian, we're equipped to help her in ways most parents aren't. We understand anxiety disorder. We know how to treat it." Logically, I knew she was right. Emotionally, I was devastated. Every catastrophic thought I'd ever had about Sophia inheriting my anxiety was coming true. We took her to a child psychiatrist, Dr. Chen, whom Maya knew and trusted. After comprehensive evaluation, the diagnosis was confirmed. Generalized anxiety disorder, early onset. "She's young for diagnosis," Dr. Chen explained, "but the symptoms are clear. The good news is early intervention is incredibly effective. With therapy and possibly medication, we can teach her tools to manage anxiety before it becomes debilitating." "Medication?" I felt my chest tighten. "She's 7. Isn't she too young?" "We'll start with therapy. CBT specifically for childhood anxiety. But if anxiety is interfering with her functioning, school, relationships, sleep, we may consider medication. Many children respond very well to SSRIs at low doses." Driving home, I was silent. Maya reached for my hand. "Talk to me. I can see you're spiraling." I gave this to her. My broken brain chemistry. And now she'll have to deal with anxiety her whole life because of me. "Adrian, stop. Anxiety has genetic components, yes, but you're not broken, and neither is she. You've built a full, meaningful life despite anxiety. She will too. But she's 7. She shouldn't have to deal with this yet. She should get to be a carefree kid." No 7-year-old is truly carefree. They all have struggles. Hers happens to be anxiety, and she has parents who understand it intimately. That's an advantage most anxious children don't have. At home, We had to explain to Sophia what was happening. We sat on her bed together, choosing our words carefully. Sophia, you know how Daddy and Mommy both have anxiety? How our brains worry more than other people's brains? She nodded. You take medicine and see Dr. Martinez. Right. Well, Dr. Chen thinks you might have anxiety too. That's why you worry so much about bad things happening. Her eyes filled with tears. Is something wrong with me? No, baby, nothing's wrong with you. Anxiety is just part of how some brains work. Lots of people have it, including both your parents. Will I have to take medicine like you? Maybe someday. But first you'll see a special doctor who helps kids with worry. She'll teach you ways to make the worry quieter. Will it go away? Maya and I looked at each other. How honest should we be with a 7-year-old? Anxiety might always be part of you, I said gently. Like it's part of Mommy and me. But you can learn to manage it so it doesn't control you. You can have a wonderful life even with anxiety. Promise? Promise? Look at us. We both have anxiety, and we have good lives, right? I guess. But you get really worried sometimes, Daddy. I don't want to be worried all the time. Her words pierced my heart. She'd been watching my anxiety her whole life, learning what it looked like to live anxiously. That night, after Sophia went to sleep, I broke down completely. Maya held me while I cried. She's been watching me be anxious her entire life. I've modeled this for her. Even if genetics predisposed her, I've shown her what anxiety looks like as a way of being. Adrian, you've also shown her what managing anxiety looks like. She's watched you go to therapy, take medication, pray for peace, use coping skills. She's watched you live fully despite anxiety. Those are valuable lessons. But she's 7 and already catastrophizing, already seeking constant reassurance. I've created an anxious child. You've created a sensitive, empathetic, thoughtful child who happens to have anxiety. That's not a moral failure. That's genetics and brain chemistry. At therapy, Dr. Martinez helped me process the guilt. You're catastrophizing about having created her anxiety through your modeling, but anxiety disorder isn't learned behavior, it's neurobiology. Yes, environment plays a role, but children with anxious parents don't automatically develop anxiety disorder. But she has it. She's 7 and already struggling with what I've struggled with my whole life. And she has 2 parents who understand it, can teach her tools early, can help her develop healthy coping mechanisms before anxiety becomes entrenched. Most anxious children don't have that advantage. It still feels like I've failed her. That's guilt talking, which often accompanies parental anxiety. But the reality is, you're getting her early intervention, teaching her skills, showing her that anxiety doesn't prevent a full life. That's success, not failure. Sophia started therapy with Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist specializing in anxiety disorders. Dr. Chen used play therapy and age-appropriate CBT to teach Sophia about her anxiety. Anxiety is like a worry monster in your brain, Dr. Chen explained to Sophia. It thinks it's protecting you by warning you about everything that could go wrong, but actually, it's being too helpful. We're going to teach your worry monster to be quieter. Sophia liked the metaphor. She started calling her anxiety worry monster and would tell us when it was being loud. Worry monster is saying you're going to die in a car crash, Daddy. As painful as it was to hear, I appreciated her honesty. Thanks for telling me. What did Dr. Chen teach you to tell worry monster? That it's just trying to help, but I don't need to listen to it. That you're a good driver and most people don't die in car crashes. That's exactly right. You're doing great. But internally, I was devastated. Hearing my 7-year-old articulate, catastrophic thoughts about my death, thoughts I'd had about my own parents at her age, broke my heart. The support group became essential again. Many members had children, and several had anxious children. Elena said, "My daughter has anxiety too. She's 12 now. It was hard accepting she'd inherited it from me, but I've watched her develop coping skills young that took me decades to learn. Early intervention is a gift," Tom added. "My son is 16 and just started having panic attacks. I felt that same guilt, like I'd passed on something terrible. But my therapist reminded me, Would I rather he had cancer, diabetes, any number of other genetic conditions? Anxiety is manageable. It's treatable. It's not a tragedy. It feels like tragedy when it's your 7-year-old, I said. I know, but you're helping her learn to manage it young. She'll have tools for life. That's actually beautiful. At work, I incorporated childhood anxiety into the physician wellness program. Many physicians struggled with guilt about passing anxiety to their children. I have generalized anxiety disorder, I told a group of residents. My 7-year-old daughter does too. I spent months drowning in guilt, convinced I'd failed her by passing on my anxiety. But my wife, a psychiatrist, reminded me, anxiety disorder is neurobiology, not moral failure. And our daughter has parents who understand it, can help her, can model healthy management. That's an advantage, not a disadvantage. One resident approached me afterward crying, "My 6-year-old was just diagnosed with anxiety. I've been secretly devastated, feeling like a terrible parent." Hearing you talk about this publicly helps. You're not terrible. You're a parent dealing with genetic realities. Get her help early, teach her skills, show her that anxious people can thrive. That's all we can do. Sophia's anxiety manifested differently than mine. Where I catastrophized about health and catastrophe, she worried primarily about separation, about me or Maya dying, about being abandoned, about losing people she loved. Every goodbye triggered anxiety. Every evening, she'd worry I wouldn't come home from work. Bedtime was particularly hard. She didn't want us to leave her alone, convinced something terrible would happen. Dr. Chen taught us how to handle reassurance seeking. Don't give endless reassurance. It feeds the anxiety cycle. Instead, acknowledge the feeling and redirect. I hear you're worried. That must feel scary. What did we learn about handling worry thoughts? It was incredibly hard to not reassure her when she was scared. Every parental instinct wanted to promise nothing bad would happen, but we knew that endless reassurance reinforced the anxiety pattern. One night, after an hour of bedtime anxiety, I sat on Sophia's floor praying. God, I don't know how to help her. I know what she's feeling. I've felt it my whole life. But watching my daughter experience this torture is harder than experiencing it myself. Please help her find peace. Please let the anxiety of her mind find peace in you like mine has. I felt God's presence, and a thought came clearly. You found peace as an adult. Teach her to find it as a child. Give her what you discovered at 31 at 7. That realization shifted my perspective. Yes, Sophia had anxiety disorder, but she was learning to manage it at 7, before it became debilitating, before it cost her relationships or opportunities, before decades of struggle. I started teaching her what God had taught me. In age-appropriate ways, I'd pray with her. God, the anxiety of Sophia's mind finds peace in you. Help her worry monster be quieter. Help her trust that you're with her. She started repeating it herself. When anxious, she'd whisper, "The anxiety of my mind finds peace in God." It didn't eliminate her anxiety, but it gave her a framework, a way to understand that anxiety was real but not ultimate, that God's peace was available even when worry monster was loud. Maya and I had to decide whether to start Sophia on medication. Her anxiety was interfering with school. She couldn't focus, worried constantly about us, cried easily when stressed. Dr. Chen recommended a low-dose SSRI. It won't eliminate anxiety, but it will make it more manageable, so therapy can be effective. I was torn. I took medication and knew it helped, but the idea of my 7-year-old on psychiatric medication felt wrong somehow. I've been on SSRIs since I was 19, Maya reminded me. They've allowed me to function, to build a career, to have a family. Why would you deny Sophia that benefit? She's 7 and suffering. Medication isn't moral failure. It's medical treatment for a medical condition. She was right. We started Sophia on a low dose of fluoxetine. Within a few weeks, we saw changes. She was still anxious, but less overwhelmed by it, more able to use the coping skills Dr. Chen was teaching. Worry monster is quieter now, she told us. The medicine makes it easier to tell it to be quiet. Watching her articulate this at 7 amazed me. I'd struggled to understand that concept until my 30s. At church, Father Michael started a children's anxiety group inspired by Sophia's struggles and our family's openness about mental health. 8 children came to the first meeting, all anxious, all feeling alone in their struggles, and all learning that God's peace was available to anxious children, not just adults. God loves your worry thoughts, Father Michael told them. He's not mad at you for being anxious. He wants to help you find peace, even when worry is loud. Sophia loved the group. Being around other anxious children normalized her experience. She wasn't the only one with worry monster. Other kids understood. One girl, Katie, became Sophia's close friend. Katie had selective mutism from severe anxiety. She literally couldn't speak in certain situations, but in the anxiety group, she gradually started talking. Watching Sophia encourage Katie, seeing her use what she'd learned to help another anxious child, was beautiful. Her anxiety disorder, properly managed, was becoming a source of empathy and connection. At 7.5, Sophia had a breakthrough. She came home from school excited. "I did it, Daddy. Worry Monster was really loud today. It said you wouldn't pick me up from school, that you died. But I remembered what you taught me. I said the anxiety of my mind finds peace in God. And Worry Monster got quieter." Sophia, that's amazing. You used your tools. It didn't make Worry Monster go away completely, but it made it quiet enough that I could have fun at recess. That moment crystallized everything. Sophia was learning at 7 what had taken me decades to discover. Anxiety didn't have to control her. God's peace was available even when worry was loud. I wrote in my journal that night, 7 years since God told me the anxiety of my mind finds peace in Him. Now I'm watching my daughter learn the same truth. It breaks my heart that she has to learn it so young, but it also fills me with hope. She's not waiting until 31 to discover God's peace. She's finding it at 7. That's not tragedy. That's grace. My anxiety disorder gave her genetic predisposition, but my journey gave her a roadmap. She's walking a path I walked, but with better tools, earlier intervention, and parents who understand. God is redeeming even this. Maya and I celebrated our 8th anniversary. 8 years of 2 anxious people building a life together, now parenting an anxious child together. "Did you ever imagine this?" I asked her. "That we'd be medicating our 7-year-old for anxiety?" Honestly, yes, we both knew the genetic risk. But I also imagined we'd handle it well, which we are. Are we? I feel like I'm constantly failing her. Adrian, you're teaching her what took you 3 decades to learn. You're giving her tools young. You're showing her that anxiety doesn't prevent a full life. That's not failure. That's exactly what she needs. At the support group, I reflected on how my journey had come full circle. 7 years ago, I came here broken by anxiety. You helped me learn that God's peace was available despite my anxious mind. Now I'm helping my daughter learn the same truth at 7. It's hard. It's heartbreaking some days. But it's also beautiful. She's learning young what we learned late. That's generational healing, not generational curse. Elena smiled. And someday when she's grown, she'll help other anxious people learn what you taught her. That's how God works, using our struggles to help others. Sophia turned 8 that year. At her birthday party, watching her laugh with friends, including anxious friends from church group, I felt both grief and gratitude. Grief that she had to manage anxiety so young, gratitude that she had tools to manage it, parents who understood, and a God who offered peace, regardless of how loud Worry Monster got. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Maya said, as Sophia prepared to blow out candles. She closed her eyes tight. "I wish that Worry Monster would be quiet forever." After the party, I talked with her. "You know, Worry Monster probably won't ever be completely quiet, right?" "I know, but I can wish. Dr. Chen says it's okay to wish things were different." "It absolutely is. I wish I didn't have anxiety too. But since I do, I've learned that God's peace is stronger than my anxiety. You're learning that too. Daddy, do you think God gave me anxiety?" I think God allows anxiety for reasons we don't fully understand. But I know He gives us peace to live with it. And I believe He's going to use your anxiety to help other people someday. How? Because you understand what it feels like. Because you're learning to be brave, even when scared. Because you're discovering God's peace young. Those are gifts that will help others. She thought about that. I like that. That worry monster might actually be useful someday. It already is. You helped Katie at church group. You understood her because you understand anxiety. That's worry monster being useful. That conversation reminded me God was already redeeming Sophia's anxiety, already using it for good, already writing a story of peace conquering anxiety in her young life. The anxiety of her mind was finding peace in Him, and watching it happen was one of the most painful and beautiful things I'd ever experienced. 10 years after God spoke to me, I stood at a crossroads that would test everything I'd learned about finding peace amid anxiety. Johns Hopkins offered me the position of Chief of Emergency Medicine, the pinnacle of my career, but accepting it meant massive responsibility during a time when my anxiety disorder was being challenged from multiple directions. Mom's Alzheimer's had progressed to late stages. She was in hospice now, non-verbal, barely responsive. The doctors said she had weeks, maybe days. Meanwhile, Sophia, now 10, was navigating the anxiety of pre-adolescence with increasing difficulty. And Maya had her own crisis. Her father had stage 4 pancreatic cancer and wasn't expected to survive more than a few months. The job offer came at the worst possible time. Or perhaps, as Father Michael suggested, the exact right time to test whether I truly trusted that God's peace was deeper than any circumstance. You don't have to accept, Maya said when I told her. We're dealing with enough. But it's everything I've worked for. Chief of Emergency Medicine at Hopkins. It's the position I've dreamed about since medical school. Dreams can wait. Family can't. She was right. But I also felt pulled toward the position, like God was asking, do you trust that my peace is available even in impossible circumstances? I took a week to decide, prayed extensively, talked with Dr. Martinez, Father Michael, the support group. Everyone gave different advice. Some said accept, others said wait, most said only I could discern what was right. Finally, I accepted. Not because I had peace about it, I was anxious about everything, but because I'd learned that anxiety didn't disqualify me from moving forward. God's peace was available in the chaos, not after it resolved. My first month as chief was overwhelming. Learning administrative systems, managing 60 physicians, overseeing department operations, all while commuting to Chicago weekly to see Mom and supporting Maya through her father's illness. Sophia struggled with all the change. Her anxiety spiked dramatically. She started having panic attacks at school, full-blown, hyperventilating, convinced she was dying. I can't handle this, I told Maya one evening after a particularly difficult day. I'm trying to lead a department, support my dying mother, be present for Sophia's crisis, and support you. I'm failing at everything. You're not failing. You're human. You're dealing with more than any one person should have to handle. But you're still showing up. That's not failure. But Sophia had a panic attack at school today. The school called me in the middle of a meeting with the hospital CEO. I had to leave a critical conversation to pick up my 10-year-old who thought she was having a heart attack. Adrian, that's parenting an anxious child. It's messy and inconvenient and doesn't respect work schedules. But you showed up for her. That's what matters. Dr. Martinez helped me process the overwhelm. You're trying to be perfect in every role. Perfect chief, perfect son, perfect father, perfect husband. That's anxiety's perfectionism. You can be good enough in all roles. Good enough is actually good. But people are counting on me, my department, my mom, Sophia, Maya. I can't let them down. You're human. You'll disappoint people sometimes. You'll make mistakes. You'll have to choose between competing demands. That's life, not failure. How do I find peace when I'm constantly choosing between impossible options? The same way you've been finding peace for 10 years. By remembering that God's presence doesn't depend on your performance. His peace is available even when you're overwhelmed, even when you're making imperfect choices, even when you're barely holding it together. Mom died on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a budget meeting when Emma called. "Adrian, Mom just passed, peacefully. Dad was with her." I excused myself from the meeting, found an empty office, and cried. Relief that her suffering was over. Grief at the finality. Anxiety about whether I'd said goodbye enough times, whether she'd known I was there during her final weeks. Maya flew to Chicago with me. Sophia stayed with friends. We decided not to bring her to the funeral, wanting to protect her from additional anxiety triggers. At the funeral, I delivered the eulogy. Standing in front of hundreds of people, I shared about Mom's vibrant life before Alzheimer's, about watching her slowly disappear, about the grief of losing someone twice, once to disease, once to death. My mother had Alzheimer's for 6 years. She forgot who I was, forgot my father, forgot everything that made her her. But I have to believe, that God never forgot her. That His presence was with her even when she didn't know her own name. That the anxiety of her confused mind found peace in Him even if she couldn't articulate it. After the funeral, Emma pulled me aside. "Are you okay?" "Really? I don't know. I'm relieved her suffering is over, but I'm also terrified I'm looking at my future. Every time I forgot a word this week, I wondered if it's starting. You're 41 and under massive stress. Forgetting words is stress, not dementia. That's what everyone says. But how do I know? You don't. That's what anxiety hates, uncertainty. But you've learned to live with uncertainty. You have to apply that here. Back in Baltimore, I returned to work exhausted and grieving. The department was in crisis. Nursing shortage, budget cuts, patient satisfaction scores down. Problems that required focused leadership when I barely had energy to get through each day. One particularly difficult evening, I had a full breakdown in my office. The stress of Mum's death, Maya's father's declining health, Sophia's escalating anxiety, work demands. It all crashed down at once. I called the crisis line, something I'd never done before. The counselor talked me through immediate stabilization, then strongly recommended I increase therapy frequency and possibly adjust medication. "I feel like I'm failing," I admitted. "I've spent 10 years teaching about managing anxiety and finding peace, and I'm barely holding it together." "You're in one of life's most stressful periods, losing a parent, supporting a spouse through potential loss, parenting an anxious child, new high-pressure job. Of course you're struggling. That's not failure. That's being human under extreme stress." I increased therapy to twice weekly, adjusted my medication, and most importantly, started being honest with my team about what I was dealing with. "I lost my mother last month," I told my leadership team. "My father-in-law has terminal cancer. My 10-year-old has severe anxiety disorder. I'm struggling. I'm doing my best, but some days my best is just showing up. I need your support." The vulnerability was terrifying. As chief, I felt pressure to appear invincible, but the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Dr. Reyes, my second-in-command, said, "Thank you for being human, for showing us that leadership doesn't mean having it all together. We've got your back." The team rallied. They took on extra responsibilities, covered for me when I needed to leave for family emergencies, created space for me to lead while grieving. Maya's father died 6 weeks after my mother. Another funeral, another wave of grief. Now Maya was dealing with what I'd just experienced, losing a parent, navigating complicated grief, wondering about genetic health risks. "I understand now," she said one night, "what you felt with your mum, the relief and grief mixed together. The anticipatory grief being almost worse than actual death. I'm sorry you're going through this. At least we're going through it together. Two anxious people, both grieving, both overwhelmed, but not alone." Sophia's anxiety reached a crisis point. She was having daily panic attacks, missing significant school time, unable to sleep without one of us in her room. Dr. Chen recommended intensive outpatient treatment, 3 hours of therapy daily for 2 weeks, plus medication adjustment. She needs more support than weekly therapy can provide right now. IOP will give her intensive skills, training and stabilization. The decision to put Sophia in intensive treatment was agonizing. She was 10, but she was suffering, and we'd tried everything else. The first day of IOP, Sophia clung to Maya, crying, "I don't want to go. Please don't make me. I know it's scary, sweetheart, but Dr. Chen says this will help, and we'll be right here when you're done each day." Watching her walk into the treatment center, I felt like I was failing as a father. How had her anxiety gotten this bad? What had we missed? What could we have done differently? At therapy, Dr. Martinez challenged my guilt. "You didn't create her anxiety. You didn't fail to intervene. She's been in treatment for 3 years. Sometimes anxiety escalates despite best efforts. That's the nature of the disorder, not evidence of parental failure. But she's 10 and in intensive treatment. That feels like failure. It feels like getting your child the help she needs, which is exactly what good parents do." The IOP helped significantly. Sophia learned advanced coping skills, had intensive exposure therapy for her separation anxiety, and got her medication adjusted to a more effective dose. After 2 weeks, she returned home changed. Not cured. Anxiety was still present, but equipped, more confident in her ability to manage it. "I learned that I can handle panic attacks," she told us, "that they're scary but not dangerous. That worry monster can be really loud, but I'm stronger than it is." "We're so proud of you," Maya said. "You did really hard work." "So did you guys." Katie's parents at IOP, they don't get it like you do. They kept telling her to just stop worrying. "But you understand that I can't just stop. You helped me manage it instead." Her words reminded me that our anxiety disorders, while painful to pass on, gave us unique ability to help her. We weren't perfect parents, but we were perfectly equipped to parent an anxious child. The support group celebrated their 10-year anniversary. So many of the original members were still attending. Elena, Tom, David. We'd walked through so much together. 10 years ago, I came to this group barely functional, I shared. Drowning in anxiety, having lost my relationship, nearly losing my career. You helped me learn that my anxious mind could find peace in God. Now, I'm chief of emergency medicine, married to an amazing woman, father to a beautiful daughter. None of that happened because anxiety disappeared. It happened because I learned to live fully despite anxiety, Elena added. And now, we're all helping the next generation. My anxious daughter, your anxious daughter, Tom's anxious son, they're all learning young what we learned late. That's generational healing. At work, I implemented a new policy. Physicians could take mental health days without stigma, just like physical health days. The policy was controversial. Some thought it encouraged weakness. Mental health is health, I told the board. Our physicians are burning out, struggling with anxiety and depression, suffering in silence because they fear judgment. I'm chief of this department with anxiety disorder. I take mental health days. I adjust my medication. I'm in therapy. And I'm competent. We need to normalize this for all our physicians. The policy passed. Within a month, 3 physicians took mental health days. Previously, they'd have worked while suffering. Now they got help. One physician told me, "I've been having panic attacks for 6 months. I was terrified to admit it. Your policy gave me permission to get help. Thank you." Maya and I went on a weekend retreat. Just us, no Sophia, no work, no responsibilities. We needed space to process everything we'd been through. Your mom died. My dad died. Sophia's had a crisis. You started the most demanding job of your career. I can't believe we've survived the past 4 months. We didn't just survive, we showed up for each other, for Sophia, for our jobs, not perfectly, but faithfully. I'm exhausted, but I'm also grateful that we could walk through this together, that neither of us had to face it alone. Maya, do you ever regret marrying me? 2 anxious people trying to build a life. It's hard. Never. Yes, it's hard, but you understand me in ways no one else could. We speak the same language. We navigate anxiety together. I wouldn't trade that for anything. At church, Father Michael asked me to share my testimony, 10 years after first sharing about anxiety. 10 years ago, I told you God had shown me that my anxious mind could find peace in Him. I thought that meant anxiety would become manageable, peaceful, easy. But this past year has been the hardest of my life. My mother died of Alzheimer's. My father-in-law died of cancer. My daughter is in intensive treatment for anxiety disorder. I started a job so demanding I barely sleep. Some days I've barely held it together, but God's promise has been true. My anxious mind has found peace in Him. Not peace that removes difficulty, peace that exists in difficulty. Not peace that makes anxiety disappear. Peace that holds me when anxiety is overwhelming. That's the peace God offers. Not comfortable peace, but sustaining peace. After the service, dozens of people approached me. Most shared their own struggles with anxiety, with overwhelming circumstances, with feeling like they were barely holding on. "Thank you for being honest," one woman said. "I thought faith meant life would be peaceful. But you're showing me faith means finding peace in God, regardless of circumstances." At Sophia's 10th birthday party, I watched her interact with friends, anxious friends and non-anxious friends. She was explaining her anxiety disorder to a new friend. "I have anxiety, which means my brain worries a lot. I take medicine and see a therapist. It's like having asthma or diabetes, something you manage, not something to be ashamed of." Her matter-of-fact explanation, completely without shame, made me tear up. At 10, she had more healthy perspective on mental illness than I'd had at 30. That night, tucking her in, she said, "Daddy, I'm glad I have you and Mommy." "Why, sweetheart?" "Because you both have anxiety too, you understand, and you teach me that I can still have a good life, even though my brain worries a lot." "You absolutely can. And you are. You're brave and strong and kind. Anxiety doesn't change that." "I know. You tell me that a lot. And I'm starting to believe it." I wrote in my journal that night, 10 years since God told me my anxious mind finds peace in Him. This year tested that truth in ways I couldn't have imagined. Losing Mom, supporting Maya through losing her dad, Sophia's crisis, overwhelming job demands. There were days I barely held on, days I wondered if I'd made wrong choices, days I felt completely inadequate. But God's peace was real, not comfortable, not easy, but real. Present, sustaining. The anxiety of my mind and Maya's mind and Sophia's mind truly finds peace in Him, not peace that depends on circumstances, peace that exists regardless of circumstances. That's what 10 years has taught me. Peace isn't the absence of difficulty. It's God's presence in difficulty, and that presence is enough. More than enough. It's everything. 10 years after learning that truth, I was still learning it, still discovering new depths, still finding that God's peace was deeper than any anxiety, any circumstance, any challenge. The anxiety of my mind was finding peace in Him, today, tomorrow, always. 15 years after God spoke to me, I faced a challenge that would require me to trust everything I'd learned about God's peace in the most personal way possible. I was diagnosed with a heart condition that required immediate surgery, and every anxiety I'd ever had about health, mortality, and loss of control came roaring back with devastating force. It started with chest pain during a particularly stressful week at work. As an ER physician, I knew better than to ignore cardiac symptoms, but as someone with health anxiety, I'd also learned to recognize when I was catastrophizing normal stress sensations. "It's probably just stress," I told Maya. "I've been working 70-hour weeks. The chest tightness is tension. Or it's cardiac. You're 46, male, high-stress job, family history of heart disease. Get it checked, Adrian." The EKG was abnormal. So was the stress test. The cardiologist ordered an angiogram, which revealed a 90% blockage in my left anterior descending artery, the widow maker, as it's called in medicine. "You need surgery," Dr. Patel said. "Soon. This level of blockage puts you at significant risk for heart attack." Sitting in his office, I felt every cell in my body screaming with anxiety. This was it. My worst health fears realized. Not Alzheimer's like Mom, but heart disease, life-threatening, requiring surgery, actual danger, not catastrophized danger. Maya held my hand. We'll get through this. What if I don't survive surgery? What if something goes wrong? Sophia's 15. She needs her father. What if... Adrian, stop. You're catastrophizing. The surgeon is excellent. The survival rate for this surgery is very high. You're going to be okay. You don't know that. You can't promise that. No, I can't. But I know God's with us, that He's already in your surgery, your recovery, our future. You've been teaching that for 15 years. Now you have to trust it. At home, telling Sophia was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had. At 15, she understood enough to be terrified, but not enough to manage that terror well. "Are you going to die?" she asked, tears streaming. "I hope not. The surgery is to prevent that. But there's always risk with any surgery. I can't lose you, Dad, I can't." Her anxiety was spiraling. I could see it in her breathing, her agitation, her catastrophic thinking. "Sophia, stop. Breathe with me. I need you to use your tools. This is scary, really scary. But we can't let anxiety control us right now. But you might die." "I might, that's true. But anxiety, living in that possibility, doesn't help anything. God's with me, God's with you, God's with all of us. That's what we hold on to." Later, Maya found me in our room crying. "I can't believe I have to ask my 15-year-old daughter to prepare for possibly losing her father. This is exactly what I've been anxious about her whole life. Leaving her, traumatizing her, failing her. You're not failing her. You're having surgery that will hopefully give you many more years with her. That's not failure. But what if I die? What if she loses me now, at 15, when she's already struggling with anxiety? What if this breaks her? Then God will hold her through it, like He's held you through losing your mother, like He's held me through losing my father. It's not what we want, but it's possible. And if it happens, Sophia will survive it. Because God's peace is available even in loss." The support group rallied around me. Many members had faced serious health crises. Their testimony helped. Elena shared, "I had cancer 3 years ago, thought I was dying. But God's peace was so real during treatment. Not peace that removed the cancer or guaranteed survival, peace that held me regardless of outcome." Tom added, "My wife had emergency surgery last year. I was terrified she'd die. But I kept remembering what you've taught us, that God's already in the future. Whether she survived or died, He was already there. That helped me breathe through the terror. I'm supposed to be the one who helps you find peace. Now I'm the one needing help." David said gently, "That's how community works. We take turns holding each other. You've held us for 15 years. Let us hold you now." Their support was tangible evidence of God's presence. I wasn't facing this alone. Dr. Martinez helped me process the anxiety. "This is your worst health fear realized. Of course you're spiraling, but you have tools. You've practiced finding peace amid anxiety for 15 years. Use those tools now. But this time the danger is real. Not imagined, not catastrophized. Real. Yes. And real danger doesn't mean God's peace is unavailable. It means you need it more than ever. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in Him. Remember, that truth doesn't change because danger is real versus imagined. How do I trust that when I'm this terrified? The same way you've trusted it 1,000 times before, one breath at a time, one prayer at a time, one moment at a time. The week before surgery was the longest of my life. Work demanded attention. Sophia needed support. Her anxiety had spiked dangerously with my diagnosis. Maya was managing her own fear while trying to support both of us. One evening I found Sophia having a panic attack in her room. Full-blown, hyperventilating, crying, convinced I was going to die. I sat with her, my own heart racing with anxiety, and talked her through it. "Sophia, breathe. Match my breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're going to die. I know you're going to die. Worry Monster is saying you'll die on the operating table. Worry Monster is scared. So am I. But being scared doesn't mean the worst will happen. I'm having surgery to prevent dying, not cause it. But you don't know. You can't promise you'll survive. You're right. I can't promise. But I can promise that God's with you regardless of what happens, that His peace is available to you whether I survive or not. That's not enough. I need you. Her raw pain broke my heart. I know, sweetheart, I need me too. I don't want to die. I'm fighting to live. But ultimately it's in God's hands, and His hands are good even when outcomes aren't what we want. After she calmed down, I sat with my own terror. What if I did die? What if Sophia lost me at 15 when she was already fragile? What if this was the trauma that broke her? I prayed desperately, God, please don't let me die. Please let me survive for Sophia, for Maya, for all the work I haven't finished. Please. And I felt clearly, your life is in my hands. Always has been. Trust me. But I'm terrified. I know. Fear and trust can coexist. Trust me anyway. The night before surgery, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake writing letters. To Maya, to Sophia, to my sister Emma. Just in case. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. I wrote to Sophia. I'm so sorry. I wanted to see you graduate, see you married, meet your children. I wanted so much more time with you. But if I'm gone, remember what I've taught you. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in God. Not peace that removes anxiety, but peace that exists alongside it. You'll be anxious about losing me. That's normal. But God's peace is deeper than that anxiety. Let Him hold you through the grief. And remember, anxiety disorder doesn't define you. You're strong, capable, and deeply loved. I'm proud of who you are and who you're becoming. Writing it made everything feel terribly real. I might die tomorrow. This might be it. Maya found me crying over the letters. You're not going to need those. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. And I believe God's with you, whether you survive or don't. I'm not as brave as you think I am. I'm terrified. Bravery isn't lack of fear. It's continuing despite fear. You're having surgery despite being terrified. That's courage. At 5 a.m. we drove to the hospital. Sophia came too. She'd insisted, needing to see me before surgery. In pre-op, drugged and drowsy, I held their hands. I love you both so much. We love you too, Maya said. See you when you wake up. Daddy, please don't die, Sophia whispered. I'm going to fight like crazy not to, but if I do, remember, God's with you. His peace is real. Trust Him. Then I was being wheeled away, staring at ceiling tiles, praying, God, the anxiety of my mind finds peace in you. Even now, even here, even facing potential death, your peace is my anchor. I woke up in recovery, alive, surgery successful, the blockage cleared. Doctor, Patel smiling, you did great. Everything went perfectly. Maya and Sophia were there when I was alert enough to see them, both crying with relief. You made it, Sophia sobbed. You're okay. I am. God was with me through it. Recovery was harder than the surgery. Pain, exhaustion, cardiac rehab, fear of reblockage, anxiety about every chest sensation. Was it normal post-surgical pain or new blockage? Dr. Martinez helped me navigate recovery anxiety. You're hypervigilant about cardiac symptoms now. That's normal after a cardiac event. But you need to distinguish between realistic concern and anxiety-driven catastrophizing. Every chest twinge makes me think I'm dying again. That's post-traumatic anxiety. You faced your mortality. Of course, you're hypervigilant now, but most chest sensations are benign. You're healing, not reblocking. At 6 weeks post-surgery, I returned to work part-time. Walking into the ER triggered intense anxiety. What if I had another cardiac event at work? What if I couldn't handle the stress anymore? But I'd learned something over 15 years. You do hard things afraid. You move forward despite anxiety. You trust God's presence more than you trust your fears. Welcome back, Chief, Dr. Reyes said. We've missed you. Missed you too. Thanks for handling everything while I was out. How are you really doing? Anxious. Hyper-aware of every chest sensation, but also grateful to be alive, trying to trust that God's with me whether I have another cardiac event or not. That's faith, working despite legitimate fear. The support group celebrated my survival, but I also shared the ongoing anxiety. Surgery was terrifying, but recovery anxiety is harder in some ways. At least with surgery, it was one event. Now I'm living with chronic awareness of cardiac risk. Every day, wondering if today's the day something goes wrong again. Elena nodded. That's the nature of health anxiety after a health event. The fear is grounded in reality now, but you still have to live, still have to trust, still have to find peace despite legitimate risk. How do I do that? The same way you've done everything else. Remember that God's peace is available regardless of health status. Trust Him with outcomes you can't control. Live fully today instead of fearing tomorrow. Sophia struggled with the aftermath too. She'd become hyper-vigilant about my health, constantly asking if I was okay, panicking at any sign of discomfort. "Dad, you look pale. Are you having a heart attack?" "No, sweetheart. I'm just tired. Remember what Dr. Chen taught you about anxiety? It makes us see danger everywhere. But last time you said it was just stress and it was actually your heart." She had a point. My previous dismissal of symptoms had nearly cost my life. How did I teach her appropriate health awareness without feeding anxiety? Dr. Chen helped us navigate it in family therapy. "Sophia, your fear is understandable. Your dad had a serious health scare, but constant vigilance doesn't keep him safe. It just makes everyone anxious. Your dad knows his body now. He knows what symptoms to watch for. You need to trust him and trust his doctors. But what if he dies? That possibility exists for everyone. You could lose your dad, or your mom, or me. Death is part of life. But living in constant fear of potential loss robs you of joy in present relationship. God's peace is available to you even in uncertainty about your dad's health. At my 3-month cardiac follow-up, all tests were normal. No re-blockage. Heart function good. Dr. Patel was pleased. "You're doing great. Keep up the lifestyle changes. Take your medications and you should have many good years ahead." Should, not will. Nothing's guaranteed, Adrian, but your prognosis is excellent. Driving home, I reflected on how this experience had tested everything I'd learned about God's peace. Facing real danger, not imagined. Actual mortality risk, not catastrophized worry. And discovering that God's peace was just as real in genuine crisis as it had been in anxiety-driven ones. I wrote in my journal, 15 years since God told me my anxious mind finds peace in Him. This year, I faced death, surgery on my heart. Real danger not imagined, and God's peace was real. Not peace that prevented the blockage or guaranteed surgical success, but peace that held me through the terror, peace that sustained Maya and Sophia through their fear, peace that exists regardless of health status or life circumstances. I learned that peace isn't just for anxiety disorders, it's for real crises too, that God's presence is most tangible when life is most fragile, that the anxiety of my mind truly finds peace in Him, whether facing imagined dangers or real ones. Sophia turned 16. At her party, surrounded by friends and family, I watched her laugh and felt overwhelming gratitude. I could have missed this, could have died, and left her fatherless at 15. "Thank you, God, for letting me be here," I prayed silently, "for giving me more time with her. Help me use it well." That night, Sophia hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you didn't die, Dad." Me too, sweetheart. Every day I have with you is a gift. I still worry sometimes that you'll have another heart problem. I know. That anxiety makes sense. But we can't let fear of what might happen rob us of enjoying what is happening. That's hard. It is. But you've been practicing it your whole life, living despite anxiety. This is just another application of what you already know. She smiled. "I guess you're right. Worry monster is loud about your heart. But I'm learning to live anyway." That's exactly right. That's all any of us can do, acknowledge the worry and live anyway. The anxiety of our minds, mine, Maya's, Sophia's, was finding peace in Him, through cardiac crisis and recovery, through ongoing health anxiety, through the reality of mortality. God's peace was real, present, sustaining. And it was teaching us that life is precious, not because it's guaranteed, but because it's a gift we receive moment by moment from a God who holds all moments. 20 years after God spoke to me in that dark church sanctuary, I found myself back in a similar place, the Adoration Chapel at our church in Baltimore, surrounded by silence and the presence of God. So much had changed in 2 decades. I'd gone from a broken physician drowning in anxiety to chief of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins. From someone who'd lost a relationship because of anxiety to a husband of 16 years and father of an 18-year-old. From barely functional to leading physician wellness programs that had helped thousands. But some things hadn't changed. I still had anxiety disorder, still took medication, still went to therapy, still had moments where panic threatened to overwhelm me. The difference was, I'd learned something that changed everything. The anxiety of my mind found peace in God. Sophia was graduating high school in a week, heading to college, leaving home. Every transition triggered my anxiety about her safety, her mental health, her ability to manage anxiety disorder away from home. She's ready, Maya kept reminding me. We've given her every tool. She knows how to manage her anxiety. She knows how to find peace in God. We have to trust both her and Him. But what if she has a crisis? What if she needs us and we're not there? Then she'll handle it. Like we've taught her. Like she's been practicing for 18 years. I knew Maya was right, but parental anxiety didn't respect logic. That evening, sitting in the chapel, I reflected on the entire 20-year journey. From that desperate night, when I'd first heard God's voice, to now, 2 decades of learning to live anxiously but faithfully. I thought about Rachel, my first girlfriend who'd left because of my anxiety. She'd been right to leave. I wasn't healthy enough for relationship then. But her leaving had pushed me to get help, which led to hearing God's voice. I thought about the breakdown that had felt like the end, but was actually the beginning. The night I'd sat in my car, convinced I was losing everything, when God had spoken words that would transform my life. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. 20 years of learning what those words meant. Learning that peace wasn't the absence of anxiety, but God's presence alongside it. That I could be anxious and peaceful simultaneously. That anxiety didn't disqualify me from anything. Not love, not career success, not parenting, not faith, not living fully. I pulled out my journal. I'd filled dozens over 20 years documenting the journey. Flipping through pages, I saw the progression. Early entries full of desperation and doubt. Middle entries processing crises and growth. Recent entries showing hard-won wisdom and ongoing struggle. 20 years, I wrote on a fresh page. 20 years since God told me my anxious mind could find peace in Him. I thought that meant anxiety would become manageable, that I'd master it. That I'd graduate from being an anxious person. But I'm still anxious. Probably always will be. What's changed isn't the anxiety, it's my relationship with it. I've learned to live fully despite it, to lead despite it, to love despite it, to parent despite it, to trust God despite it. The anxiety didn't leave, but peace came anyway. Not peace instead of anxiety, but peace alongside it. And that's been enough, more than enough. It's been everything. The support group was celebrating their 20th anniversary with a special gathering. Over 100 people attended, current members, alumni, people whose lives had been changed by learning that anxious minds could find peace in God. Standing before them, I shared my testimony one more time. 20 years ago, I came to this group broken, barely functional. Convinced anxiety had destroyed my life. You helped me learn that God's peace was available despite my anxiety, that I didn't have to wait for anxiety to disappear to experience peace. Over these 20 years, I've faced everything anxiety told me would destroy me. I got married to another anxious person. We had a child who inherited our anxiety disorders. I took on leadership roles that terrified me. I lost my mother. I faced my own mortality through heart surgery. None of it was easy. All of it was anxiety-inducing, but God's peace was real through all of it. I paused, looking at faces in the crowd, Many I knew intimately, people who'd walked beside me through every crisis. Others were new, just beginning their journey of learning to find peace despite anxiety. If you're here because anxiety is controlling your life, I want you to know something. God's peace is real, available, transformative. Not peace that eliminates anxiety, but peace that exists alongside it. You can have a full, meaningful, joyful life despite anxiety disorder. I'm living proof. Everyone in this room is living proof. Don't wait for anxiety to disappear to start living. Learn to live anxiously but faithfully. Find peace in God's presence, not in perfect mental health. After the gathering, dozens of people shared their stories with me. Most were testimonies of discovering that peace and anxiety could coexist. One young man, probably mid-20s, told me, "I found your blog 3 years ago when I was suicidal from anxiety. Learning that anxious minds find peace in God saved my life. I'm here today, in recovery, because of what you taught me." An older woman shared, "I've had anxiety disorder for 40 years. I thought it meant I had weak faith. Your teaching showed me anxiety is neurobiology, not spiritual failure. That's given me freedom I never had before." A parent approached with tears. "My son has severe anxiety. I didn't know how to help him until I found your work. Now we're both learning to find peace despite anxiety. Thank you for showing us the way." These testimonies reminded me why I'd learned about God's peace, not just for myself, but to help others discover it too. At work, I was preparing to step down as chief. 20 years at Johns Hopkins, 5 as chief. It was time for the next generation to lead. My replacement was Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist who'd treated Sophia, who'd gone on to get her MD and now specialized in physician wellness. "You've created an incredible legacy," she told me. "The wellness programs, the cultural shift around mental health, the permission for physicians to be human. That will outlast your tenure as chief. Thank you. It's been the privilege of my life to lead here, to use my own struggles to help other physicians find health and peace." And what's next for you? More writing, more speaking, more focused work on physician mental health. I want to expand what we've started here to hospitals nationwide. You'll be amazing at it. You've lived what you teach. That makes all the difference. Sophia's graduation was emotional for everyone. Watching her walk across that stage, I thought about how far she'd come. From a 7-year-old diagnosed with anxiety disorder to an 18-year-old heading to college with tools to manage it. At the graduation party, she pulled me aside. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm scared about college, worried I'll have panic attacks away from home, anxious about managing everything on my own." That's normal. Transitions trigger anxiety for everyone, but especially for people with anxiety disorders. But what if I can't handle it? What if I fail? "Sophia, you've been practicing handling anxiety your whole life. You have tools. You know how to find peace in God despite worry. You're more equipped than most college freshmen, but you and Mom won't be there. We're just a phone call away. But more importantly, God's with you, the same God who's been with you through every anxious moment for 18 years. He'll be with you at college too. How do you still trust that after everything? After your heart surgery, after grandma dying, after all the hard things? Because God's been faithful through everything. Not by preventing difficulty, but by being present in it. That's what trust is. Not believing life will be easy, but believing God will be with us when it's hard." She hugged me tightly. "Thank you for teaching me that, for showing me that anxious people can do hard things. You've shown me the same thing, sweetheart. Watching you manage anxiety with courage has taught me more than I've taught you." Maya and I dropped Sophia off at college 3 months later. Watching her walk into her dorm, I felt every parental emotion: pride, anxiety, sadness, hope. "She's going to be okay," Maya said, reading my mind. "I know, but I'm still anxious about everything that could go wrong." "Of course you are. You're a parent with anxiety disorder, but you're also trusting God with her future. Both can be true." Driving home without Sophia felt surreal. Our house was too quiet, her absence palpable. "Empty nest," I said to Maya. We're in the empty nest phase. How are you handling it? Anxious, but also peaceful. That seems to be my perpetual state, anxious and peaceful simultaneously. She laughed. 20 years of marriage, and you still surprise me with your honesty? What do you mean? Most people wouldn't admit to being anxious while also claiming peace. But you've learned they coexist. That's wisdom most people never discover. The support group continued without my regular attendance. I'd stepped back to let new leaders emerge. But I visited occasionally, touched by how the community had grown. Elena, now one of the senior leaders, told the group, "Adrian taught us that anxious minds find peace in God, but he also taught us that community matters, that we need each other, that we're not meant to face anxiety alone." 20 years later, this group exists because he had courage to share his struggle publicly. That vulnerability created space for all of us to share ours. At church, Father Michael, now retired but still my spiritual director, reflected on the 20-year journey with me. "You've helped more people than you realize," he said, "not just through your programs or books or speaking, but through your willingness to live authentically, to be publicly anxious while also publicly faithful. That's rare. Most people hide one or the other. I didn't choose it. Anxiety made hiding impossible. But you chose what to do with that impossibility. You could have hidden in shame. Instead, you shared your struggle and showed others that peace was possible despite it. That's ministry. I started writing a book, my third, about the 20-year journey. Not a self-help book with steps to eliminate anxiety, a testimony about learning to live fully despite it. The opening chapter began, 20 years ago, God told me my anxious mind would find peace in him. I thought that meant anxiety would disappear. It didn't. I still have anxiety disorder, still take medication, still go to therapy, still have moments of panic and overwhelming worry. But I've also experienced peace I never thought possible. Peace that exists alongside anxiety, not instead of it. Peace that comes from God's presence, not from perfect circumstances or mental health. This is the story of learning that peace, not by conquering anxiety, but by discovering God in the midst of it. At Thanksgiving, Sophia came home from college. She'd had panic attacks, moments of overwhelming anxiety, times when she'd called us crying. But she'd also thrived, made friends, succeeded academically, navigated anxiety with the tools we'd given her. "How's it really going?" I asked her. "Hard. I'm anxious a lot, but I'm also okay. I'm learning what you've been teaching me my whole life, that I can be anxious and still function, that anxiety doesn't have to control me. I'm so proud of you." I called the campus mental health center. I'm seeing a therapist there. And I joined a support group for students with anxiety. That's incredibly mature, seeking help when you need it. I learned from you and Mom. You never hid your struggles. You modeled that getting help is strength, not weakness. Her words validated 20 years of vulnerable parenting. We hadn't hidden our anxiety disorders. We'd managed them openly, teaching Sophia that mental health was health. On Christmas Eve, the whole family attended midnight mass. As we stood singing Silent Night, I felt overwhelming gratitude. 20 years ago, I'd been broken in a church parking lot, desperately asking God for help. Now I stood in a church, healthy and whole, surrounded by family, having helped thousands discover God's peace. The anxiety hadn't left, but everything else had changed. After Mass, I went back to the Adoration Chapel alone, knelt in the same spot where I'd spent countless hours over 20 years. "Thank you, God," I prayed, "for teaching me that my anxious mind finds peace in you, for sustaining me through 2 decades of anxiety disorder, for using my struggle to help others, for Maya, for Sophia, for the community that supported me, for every moment of peace in the midst of anxiety, for proving that your presence is more powerful than any mental illness. Thank you." I felt God's presence, the same presence I'd felt 20 years ago when he'd first spoken those life-changing words. And I heard clearly in my spirit, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with your anxiety. You've learned to find peace in me. You've taught others to do the same. That's all I asked of you. Writing in my journal that night, I reflected on the complete journey. 20 years since God spoke. 20 years of anxiety disorder. 20 years of learning that peace isn't the absence of anxiety, but God's presence in it. I'm 51 now. Who knows how many years I have left? My heart condition reminds me life is fragile. But however many years God gives me, I know how I want to live them. Anxiously but faithfully, struggling but trusting, imperfect but authentic, teaching others that the anxiety of their minds can find peace in Him. Not because I've mastered it, but because I've lived it, because God's peace has been real for me through every anxious moment, every crisis, every struggle. That peace is my testimony. That peace is my message. That peace is everything. I thought about everyone who'd walked this journey with me. Rachel, who'd left but pushed me toward help. Dr. Martinez, who'd treated me for 20 years. Father Michael, who'd guided me spiritually. The support group members who'd become family. My colleagues who'd given grace when anxiety made me difficult. Maya, who'd loved me including my anxiety. Sophia, who'd inherited my disorder, but also my faith. All of them were part of the story. All of them were evidence that God had been faithful. The anxiety of my mind had found peace in Him. Not peace that removed anxiety. It was still there, still loud sometimes, still challenging always, but peace that was deeper than anxiety. Peace that sustained through every crisis. Peace that enabled life I'd thought was impossible for someone with my mental health struggles. I'd been married 16 years to an amazing woman who also had anxiety disorder. We'd raised a daughter through childhood anxiety and into young adulthood. I'd led an emergency department through crises and growth. I'd written books, spoken to thousands, helped create cultural change around mental health in medicine. None of that happened because anxiety disappeared. All of it happened because I'd learned to live faithfully despite anxiety. That was God's gift, not the removal of struggle, but presence in struggle, not the elimination of anxiety, but peace alongside it. 20 years later, I finally understood what God had meant that desperate night when He'd spoken those simple words. The anxiety of your mind finds peace in me. Not peace instead of anxiety, peace with anxiety, peace through anxiety, peace despite anxiety. God's peace, real, available, sustaining, transformative. It had been enough for 20 years. It would be enough for whatever years remained. The anxiety of my mind had found peace in Him. And that peace, that profound, tested, proven peace, was everything I needed. As I closed my journal and prepared for bed, I felt gratitude beyond words. Not because life was easy, it wasn't. Not because anxiety was gone, it wasn't. But because God's promise had been true. My anxious mind really had found peace in Him. And that peace, discovered 20 years ago in a dark church parking lot and proven through 2 decades of living, was the most precious gift I'd ever received. The anxiety didn't leave, but God gave peace. And peace, I'd learned, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.